All right, guys. This is Circa Ignem podcast number 002. My dear Wormwood, I had noticed, of course, that the humans were having a lull in their European war, what they naively call, quote, the war, unquote, and am not surprised that there is a corresponding lull in the patient's anxieties. Do we want to encourage this or to keep him worried? Tortured fear and stupid confidence are both desirable states of mind. Our choice between them raises important questions. The humans live in time, but our enemy destines them to eternity. He therefore, I believe, wants them to attend chiefly to two things, to eternity itself and to that point of time which they call the present. For the present is the point at which time touches eternity. Of the present moment, and of it only, humans have an experience analogous to the experience which our enemy has of reality as a whole. In it alone freedom and actuality are offered them. He would therefore have them continually concerned either with eternity, which means being concerned with him, or with the present, either meditating on their eternal union with or separation from himself, or else obeying the present voice of conscience, bearing the present cross, receiving the present grace, giving thanks for the present pleasure. Our business is to get them away from the eternal and from the present. With this in view, we sometimes tempt a human, say a widow or a scholar, to live in the past, but this is of limited value, for they have some real knowledge of the past and it has a determinate nature and, to that extent, resembles eternity. It is far better to make them live in the future. Biological necessity makes all their passions point in that direction already, so that thought about the future inflames hope and fear. Also, it is unknown to them, so that in making them think about it, we make them think of unrealities. In a word, the future is, of all things, the thing least like eternity. It is the most completely temporal part of time, for the past is frozen and no longer flows, and the present is all lit up with eternal rays. Hence, the encouragement we have given to all those schemes of thought such as creative evolution, scientific humanism, or communism, which fix men's affections on the future, on the very core of temporality. Hence, nearly all vices are rooted in the future. Gratitude looks to the past and love to the present. Fear, avarice, lust, and ambition look ahead. Do not think lust an exception. When the present pleasure arrives, the sin which alone interests us is already over. The pleasure is just the part of the process which we regret and would exclude if we could do so without losing the sin. It is the part contributed by the enemy, and therefore experienced in a present. The sin, which is our contribution, looked forward. To be sure, the enemy wants men to think of the future too, just so much as is necessary for now planning the acts of justice or charity, which will probably be their duty tomorrow. The duty of planning the morrow's work is today's duty. Though its material is borrowed from the future, the duty, like all duties, is in the present. This is not straw-splitting. He does not want men to give the future their hearts, to place their treasure in it. We do. His ideal is a man who, having worked all day for the good of posterity, if that is his vocation, washes his mind of the whole subject, commits the issue to heaven, and returns at once to the patience or gratitude demanded by the moment that is passing over him. But we want a man, hag-ridden by the future, haunted by visions of an imminent heaven or hell upon earth, ready to break the enemy's commands in the present if by so doing we make him think he can attain the one or avert the other, dependent for his faith on the success or failure of schemes whose end he will not live to see. We want a whole race perpetually in pursuit of the rainbow's end, never honest, nor kind, nor happy now, but always using as mere fuel wherewith to heap the altar of the future every real gift which is offered them in the present. It follows then in general and other things being equal, that it is better for your patient to be filled with anxiety or hope. It doesn't much matter which. About this war than for him to be living in the present, but the phrase living in the present is ambiguous. It may describe a process which is really just as much concerned with the future as anxiety itself. Your man may be untroubled about the future, not because he is concerned with the present, but because he has persuaded himself that the future is going to be agreeable. As long as that is the real course of his tranquility will do us good, because it is only piling up more disappointment and therefore more impatience for him when his false hopes are dashed. If, on the other hand, he is aware that horrors may be in store for him, and his praying for the virtues wherewith to meet them, and meanwhile concerning himself with the present, because there, and there alone, all duty, all grace, all knowledge, and all pleasure dwell, his state is very undesirable and should be attacked at once. Here again, our philological arm has done good work. Try the word, quote, complacency, end quote, on him. But, of course, it is most likely that he is, quote, living in the present, end quote, for none of these reasons, but simply because his health is good and he is enjoying his work. The phenomenon would then be merely natural. All the same, I should break it up if I were you. No natural phenomenon is really in our favor, and anyway, why should the creature be happy? Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. And tonight, we have with us Mr. Rick Valdez, a son of God, the living God, a wonderful husband, father of 5, here to share with us a little bit about himself. Rick, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you. That was quite the excerpt. Kind of appropriate, too.
It's funny. When you mentioned that, I was kind of flipping through it because I've read it like 2 or 3 times.
The book?
Yeah, the book. And it was one of those, all of a sudden I was like, damn, like that is very apropos,
Well, and it starts off talking about anxiety and war, and I'm thinking of everything going on right now in the world, and I'm thinking, man, that's, very appropriate.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think I've only read that book once. Probably over 10, maybe almost 15 years ago.
Okay.
I actually remember reading it on the plane on the way back from our honeymoon. And I think it was chapter 9. There's a chapter where he kind of describes basically Jesus' sacrifice.
Okay.
And he almost goes into describing it in a way that he like almost is acknowledging the beauty of like God sending his son. But then for those who haven't read it, it's the Screwtape letters. It's basically correspondence between demons, from the one demon who is in charge of this man, and his quest is to lead him to damnation. And it's his uncle Screwtape who's writing to him, to that demon, basically giving him advice on how to make that happen, which is why it's called the Screwtape letters.
Yeah, and what's interesting is it was hard reading it after many years of not reading it, and when he is referring to the enemy, he's referring to Jesus. Right. He's referring to the Trinity.
Yeah.
And it was like this, wait, like I have to, because my Christian mind is going, no, the enemy is you.
Right, yeah, remind yourself. So I'm reading, it's funny because I was reading that chapter and I like, it just moved me. I remember just getting teary-eyed on a plane because I'm like, man, this is kind of beautiful in the way he describes it. And then of course he goes into like, and that's why we must stop him, or and I'm like, oh, okay, well, just going through a roller coaster of emotions, 30,000 feet in the air. But anyway, yeah.
So what were you traveling for?
That was our honeymoon.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we flew to Fort Lauderdale.
You're reading the Screwtape letters on your honeymoon?
Well, I mean, when you're going to be traveling all day and on a plane, I mean, it's like, yeah, we just got married yesterday, but I don't know if this is appropriate for your podcast or not, but it's like the thing you really want to do when you just got married. You're not going to do that on a plane, although I guess some people would. And have.
Well, these days, yes.
There's a name for that club, but we are
thankfully not part of it.
We're children of God. We don't do that kind of thing. 30,000 feet in the air. Wait till we land. Anyway, so no, but that's why I ended up, reading that on the plane. And after I finished that, and I don't think I finished it, but then there was the was it called the snake bite letters? The one that, was it Peter Kraft?
Peter Kraft, yeah.
Yeah, which was more specific to, a lot of it was specific to a liturgy, from what I remember.
I actually don't recall snake bite very much at all. I actually recall C.S. Lewis Screwtape letters a lot more because, like you heard it in that excerpt, and it's, I don't know if this is totally factual, but from what I've heard, it is very much known, I guess, colloquially, that J.R.R. Tolkien and challenged C.S. Lewis very vehemently, like, what did you do? After he had shown him the original manuscript for Screwtape letters, meaning... what did you expose yourself to?
Yeah.
And the way that he writes, it's like he's put himself in the shoes of a demon.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, Tolkien was coming from, was what the heck?
What realms did you tap into?
Because the way he writes is at very much extremely intellectual person, C.S. Lewis. So he's writing in this very intellectual way, which would be a demon, because they're fallen angels, right? So their intellect is far beyond what we could comprehend. Not God's, but far beyond human.
Yeah.
And so the way he's writing is like this, perversion, right? Like, but it's enough truth to really mess with us, right?
Yeah. Well, he kind of alludes to that, I think, in the prologue or whatever introduction, where he kind of says, like, I have no intention of making it known how these letters came to me, or how, I kind of wondered, like, what did you tap into? Because, definitely. And it was around that time when I was reading, it was around the time that The Dark Knight, Batman, and Heath Ledger, and I kind of, like, to me, it was kind of, there was a little of a parallel kind of a notion of, like, Heath Ledger got way deep into this character, almost to the point that he went off the ledge a little bit, and it, there's at least a thought that maybe that kind of drove him to, ended up committing suicide, how he ended up doing, and I kind of had that same kind of like, well, I wonder if C.S. Lewis kind of treaded those waters a little bit, in a different kind of way, but anyway, great book.
It is. Very good book. For those listening, recommend it. If you haven't read it in a while, I'd recommend it as well. It's a good kind of reminder of what's out there, right? Like, we are in a battle. There's no mincing those words, both physically and spiritually. All right, so lightning round questions, Rick.
Here we go.
What's your wake up routine like?
Oh man. My wake-up routine is, I wish it was a little more consistent. I don't have the luxury of a set work schedule, so it just kind of depends on, if I closed the night before, meaning I didn't get to bed till after 3 a.m., or if I was off or worked the day. And so it's just a little different. But one thing that I've really, really focused on in the last year is attempting to wake up with prayer.
Okay.
And I think that, hopefully in a little bit we can kind of get into that a little bit more with this first fruits thing. But I know for me, probably about a year ago, I really just kind of started, like, becoming convicted in the thought of, like, what's the first thing most of us do when we wake up in the morning? Reach for our phone.
Yep.
And I wouldn't be reaching for my phone for anything good, like, or anything worthwhile. It would be, a lot of times, to be honest, it'd be like, oh, open up Facebook or open up Instagram, and then you end up running into nothing awful, but it's like that's not the way to start your day as a Christian person. And I remember thinking, like, man, I gotta move past this, and I thought, I should at least pray a Hail Mary when I wake up. And so I kind of did that for a couple days, but then I'd forget. And so I just, you kind of try to get yourself into habits by like things that remind you of to do what you're gonna do. And I just kind of developed this routine where my first thought was, well, I'm not going to open up social media.
Yep.
So I'll just open up my emails and delete all the dumb emails I get throughout the middle of the night. And then I look back at it now, and it's funny because the icon for the emails is blue, which is the color of Our Lady. And somehow along the way, every time I would go to open the email, it would like be like a trigger that reminded me, oh, pray your Hail Mary.
Oh, interesting.
And so, I mean, I still do that today.
What app is that?
The mail app,
gotcha.
like the one that comes on the iPhone that you link to your email. But
yeah,
I still, if I forget, which is very rare, because a lot of times nowadays when I wake up, I just right then and there I'm praying a Hail Mary. Sometimes I fall back asleep, but it's like one of the first thoughts that enters my mind. But even if I kind of forget, the first thing I instinctively do, if I grab my phone, go to the mail app, and did I pray my Hail Mary? Okay, yeah, I did, or no, I didn't.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of the very first thing you do when you wake up. As far as a whole other wake up routine, I don't know if you're trying to go deeper, but
no, I mean that's like it is what it is. The question is, like open to whatever it is. I like because it's funny. I fell into very much the same trap, and you make these excuses, right? You make these like, oh well, at least I'm not on social media,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, no, like just because you're intentional about not doing something doesn't mean that what you've replaced it with is more better, better. Like, yeah, it's like it doesn't, you're just basically, I think it actually goes back to Screwtape letters, right? Like that's very much a future oriented, instead of waking up and being present, right?
Sure, yeah.
Like,
and it's funny because I ended up in a lot of times you end up in the same place. Like when I'd be scrolling through my email, it's like, oh, a Daily Wire email about whatever, this political thing or news thing is going on. And then I click that, and next thing I know, I'm reading a story, which is most of what I end up doing on social media too, is like, that's kind of your news app now, be damned if I end up using the Apple News app, so anyway, but yeah, so that's
what's wrong with the Apple app?
We don't have that much time on this show. All
right, so next one is, how many times have you been pulled over or interacted with the police?
Oh man, if I was a superstitious type here, I'd be looking for a piece of wood to knock on, but we don't believe in that. Not as much in my adult life, and when I say that, I mean like, mid-20s and later. I'm 36 now. For some reason, I would say I started driving when I was 18, so between the ages of 18 through 20, I would say, I got pulled over a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it was the weirdest thing because a lot of times I don't think I was doing it. A lot of times I wasn't doing anything that dumb. Okay. And actually the first ticket I ever got, I wasn't even driving. So
wait,
imagine that.
You have to elaborate.
Yeah. No, I'm still mad about this one. My buddy Adam had just gotten a truck.
Okay.
And he wanted to take me around the block for a spin in it. So we went. And I grew up about a block away from an elementary school. So we went onto like the main street, but then he turned into like the small street roads. And we were driving next to the elementary school. And because we were just driving just near the house, and it wasn't really like we weren't going for a long drive. We were just kind of driving like the residential roads. I didn't have my seatbelt on.
Oh,
yeah. Okay. And we passed by a cop who had pulled someone else over and was writing them a ticket, probably for the same thing, who knows. And I see him look at me, notices I don't have a seatbelt on, and I see him rush to finish writing the ticket, hustles into the car, and turns on the blue and reds, and so I got pulled over, he got pulled over. I got a ticket for that,
Okay.
even though I wasn't driving, but I already had my driver's license, and so I got ticketed for that, and I got him a ticket accidentally because he didn't have proof of insurance. So so I mean, he wasn't too mad at me.
Got the double whammy.
But yeah,
he's hitting that quota real fast.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So that was the first ticket I ever got. I've gotten a couple speeding tickets here and there, but you know what's funny is my older brother particularly, but both my brothers would get so mad because I've probably been pulled over 10 to 15 times.
Okay.
And that was all in that span.
Yeah.
And I think I only ever got 2, maybe 3 tickets.
Right.
I would get let go a lot.
Okay.
And they would get so mad because they're like, dude, what are you doing to get let go? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't really doing anything wrong. I don't know why they were pulling me over. One time it was for, I made like an illegal turn. Another time, I think, I don't remember what it was, but I remember one time in particular, I thought I was just kind of being like, I've always had respect for law enforcement. I've never been an anti-law enforcement guy by any means, especially not in my adult life. But I remember kind of thinking like, well, if I'm cool to the cop, they'll be cool back to me.
Yep.
And that always typically worked for me.
Yeah.
But this one time in particular, this cop was not having it. And I remember he asked me for something, and I called him bro.
Oh, whoops.
Which I'd done before with other cops, so it wasn't really like uncharted territory for me. But I remember I called him bro, and he looks at me and he's like, I'm not your bro. And I learned my lesson
and you
that
knew
day.
right away. It was like, ooh, that hit a nerve.
Yeah. So ever since that day, it's yes, officer, no, officer.
Yeah.
So
do you find, not to get, these are supposed to be lightning round questions,
sorry.
but no, you're good. Do you find that it was because you started out being respectful?
I think a lot of times it was.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny is later on, like I said, I got pulled over a lot during those years. Anytime since that I've been pulled over, and it's probably been maybe 5 times after that, since I've been working with In-N-Out Burger. And it's funny because we talk about this amongst like In-N-Out associates. Cops are really willing to let you go if you work for In-N-Out Burger.
Oh, interesting.
Well, In-N-Out does a police discount, and and I hope people don't take that like to say it's a bribe or anything, but
I don't think it's a bribe. It's the fact that they value they're
doing,
the enterprise, right? Like they value.
And part 3 of In-N-Out's mission purpose statement is assisting all communities in our marketplace to become stronger, safer, and better places to live.
Nice.
And that's why, like, that's the only discount we give is a police discount. People ask for senior citizen discounts, military discounts, all kinds of stuff, and we don't. The only discount we give is the police discount. If I go in on my day off, I pay full price.
Yep.
So it's so I think, and I would cheat a little bit because for the longest time on my rearview mirror, I had a rosary hanging, but clipped to that rosary was my In-N-Out name tag. And so a lot of times when I get pulled over, they knew right away.
I still have mine. I should just leave it up.
Yeah, you never know, But it didn't work for me coming back home from Kettleman City, though. I was doing 72 and a 55, and that was expensive.
I know that stretch all too well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how many guys get caught there.
Yeah.
I'm always like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah, I was being dumb.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Greatest accomplishment to date?
Oh, man. I would say probably being a father or having children.
Yeah.
Just because it's one of the, like, it's mind-blowing when you really think about it from the perspective of, like, we get to be co-creators with God. Mm-hmm. He allows us to have a part in the role of creation, and I'm sure you understand this as much as I do. It's like how many times as fathers that we just feel unworthy, and we just feel like
pretty much every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also to the weight of that responsibility.
Yep.
And I remember when my first my firstborn son, Andrew, was born, being in the nursery, just in awe of him.
Mm-hmm.
And, my wife had a C-section, so they were, finishing up, stitching her up and stuff. And I was in the nursery with him, so I hadn't seen anybody else. And I look up, and through the big nursery window, my parents were right there looking at me. And
just seeing that connection.
Yeah. And I was just, and I kind of getting emotional thinking about it, but I remember just kind of walking out, and my mom goes to hug me, and I lost it. I just absolutely lost it in her arms, and I just start bawling. And I remember thinking afterwards, it was like, of all the things that dumb things I've done in my life, of all the times growing up that I screwed up or did things to disappoint them and got in trouble, and Lord knows there were many of those, and we might get into them depending on what other questions you have in this lightning round. But just the thought that, like, I'd finally done something that very purely they could be proud of. As much as I'd screwed up in life, it's like this one moment is just the purest moment of, like, bringing them joy in a grandchild. And it just, so I definitely would say that's greatest accomplishment.
Awesome. Yeah, I can for sure resonate with that one. What's your greatest struggle with being a Catholic Christian?
Mind if I borrow that lighter?
Yeah,
I'm gonna burn this place down after that.
I know it's a deep one.
Oh man, well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, besides the obvious of, like, we all struggle with sin, and we, the problem with sin, I think, is that we like to sin. We do. It's like, if we're honest with ourselves, we talk about sin like it's this such awful thing that we, like, despise and want to get away from, which it is an awful thing, and we should despise it and should want to get away from. But the sad truth is that we don't.
No.
Because otherwise we wouldn't be, committing them as often as we do. So that's the obvious answer to that question, I think. But a deeper question, or deeper answer for me, as far as, like, the biggest struggle with, like, being a Catholic is not getting too wrapped up in, like right now with the synod and a lot of that stuff going on.
Yep.
And not getting too wrapped up in, like
the dubia.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like, well, I mean, we've all been there where we're like, well, if I was Pope, I would do this or I would do that, and we could fix the church,
We can literally pontificate all we want.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've been guilty of saying this, and probably in the last month, like, what, I could fix the church in 3 easy steps, but so that's, I think, probably one of them too. And I've been there before. I kind of went down, like, the rad trad route for a while there, especially after COVID. And I know I'm not alone, because a lot of people did. But I think more than anything, probably just the biggest challenge is just to remain faithful. And to just trust that that God's in charge, God's in control. One thing that I said a lot, like, I remember saying this a lot in my early 20s, like, doing ministry, if I gave a talk or anything like that, it was just like, Jesus promised us that the gates of hell would not prevail. Yeah. But he didn't promise us that they wouldn't try.
Oh, that's a beautiful thought.
And it's like they're gonna try. There's gonna be things, and we can't let any little thing just, like, rob us of our peace or destroy that peace or whatever we have, that closeness to God in that moment, or to be faithful to the church. And we just have to remember that God is in control, that the Holy Spirit is moving, and just kind of have that trust. You know. Yeah. So
that's awesome. I think I shared with you, this was a while back. Not a while, maybe a number of months back, but, like, it was a really, and forgive me, I forget which saint said it, but it was one of those quotes where, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember exactly what he said, but essentially the underscore single, very simple sentence was, we shouldn't be surprised when we sin.
Yeah.
You know, going back to your point, like really, and I think I, posted this on social media recently. It's like, really, the saint is simply someone that just didn't give up.
You did.
Yeah. And it really, like we put these saints on these pedestals, and some of them we should, right? Like they lived extremely exemplary lives.
Yeah.
But the reality is that they struggled with the exact same things that you and I struggle with, but they just refused. They refused to tap. They refused to say, they refused to not go to confession, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because they knew, okay, this is the source and the summit.
Yeah.
Which means that I need to be in the state of grace.
Yeah.
And I need grace in order to combat this.
Yeah.
And in order to elevate the kingdom of God, I am part of that.
Yeah.
God made me in this time, in this place. Again, back to Screwtape letters, I'm supposed to be present here and now in order to make his kingdom better and bring it to this world. So,
yeah, I think one of the most like liberating things for me in my probably early 20s, it was when we were working at the Holy Child, was I remember learning about Mother Teresa and hearing that she spent however many years like in a spiritual dryness.
Yeah.
And
it was 40 some odd years.
Yeah. And just still kept going.
Yep.
And I'm thinking like, well, that's like one of the greatest saints of our time, and if she was able to do that, because we came up, at least when I got close into my faith, I don't know what your upbringing was like, but when I really started getting into church and trying to be devout was confirmation, going through the Life Team program. And a lot of that was very emotional based. So we kind of got trained to just be into the emotion of it all, you know, and you go to like the Steubenville conferences or to a retreat and you have that mountaintop experience, but then you come back down the mountain and when you're not feeling it, you almost felt like, well, like I'm not a good Catholic or I'm not being a good Christian because I don't feel.
How do I keep that feeling all throughout life?
And that's
not reality.
It's not realistic.
Yeah.
Like that's not how it works. But I always felt like that's what it was. And I'd go to this retreat and I'd go to confession and I'd be just on the spiritual high. And then a week later, like I'd fall back into some kind of sin or would stop praying or different things. And then just feeling like I'm just a failure.
Yep.
You know, then that's what it was. And it was liberating to hear like, okay, so Mother Teresa went 40 plus years not feeling it. Yeah. But still did.
Almost the reverse of the mountaintop. It was like she was literally like in her writings, she was just kind of going, I don't even know if you're real. You know what I'm saying? Like as a saint, she's like legitimately having this faith existential discussion of, but I trust, to your point. Like I'm going to continue and be faithful because that's not what you call me to, right? It's not about, like I know you're here. I know you're right next to me. I don't feel you, right? But it's not about feelings, right? It's Catholicism. There's many writers that have talked about it in terms of love. The truest sense of love is sacrifice, and the decision. It's a decision of the will, right? It's not something that we feel, right? Yes, that's part of it, like in a romantic sense, right? Like in our marriages. But that has ups and downs too. It's like sometimes it's romantic and then sometimes it's not. Yeah. And you have to, it's a decision. It's a constant decision of I choose to love you because that's what I'm called to do. And because I do love you, not because it's like this burden. It's because that's what love is. It's a decision and we commit to it.
Very much so. Yeah. And I think anybody who's been married for longer than a month knows that it's like, there are times that it is a decision. It was the funniest thing at my sister-in-law's wedding back in May. My wife was the co-matron of honor and she's out there giving her speech and she's like, and my hope for you is that you always choose to love each other because love is a choice. And some days that choice is really hard. And I'm just standing over there, like my arms up, and I'm like I'm right here, So it just kind of was a funny moment. I actually have it on camera. I'll have to show you the video later. But awesome. It was I was being funny about it, But
it's reciprocated. Meaning sometimes you feel the same way. It's like it's not a slight on us, and typically we take it that way. But the reality is a lot. I know for myself, it actually often, way more, like 90, probably 95, 99% of the time, it's more of stuff that I'm struggling with that I'm projecting out to my wife.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, it's not actually them. It's something that I'm wrestling with, and it's like, what's the nearest thing that I can blame?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not truth, it's not reality, but that's what we want to do, to your point. It's like, oh, well, this is easy.
Yeah.
It's easier to blame people than to actually look myself in the mirror and go, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
And you need to get over yourself and figure out how to work through this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So.
All right. So this is a funny one. Right. It's meant to be funny, but why are you the way that you are, Rick?
Michael Scott to Toby. Why are you the way? Exit interview.
Yes, exactly.
What gives you the right?
I forgot about that.
Yeah. Well.
The exit interview.
Yeah. Why am I the way that I am? Well, from a funny standpoint, kind of, I guess, you know, the decisions that we make, you know, is very much so, you know. I guess it's not a funny standpoint, but I think that we're all products of I think we're products of, I mean, allow me to change thoughts on this in the future, because I'm kind of like just thinking of stuff right now in the moment, but I feel like we're the product of at least two things, and those two things for me are our upbringing and how we were brought up, and the second one would be our life decisions, and that's like 2A, and 2B would probably be how we've reacted to those decisions. But I think definitely the choices.
Reacted, by the way, is a really good word in that.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes a lot of times the what's formed us is a reaction instead of a response, right? Like a response is calculated,
thought out,
and it's thought out, whereas a reaction typically is knee jerk. It creates more problems than helps.
Yeah, definitely.
My 2 cents on that, but
yeah, and I think that, you know, we're all products of the decisions that we've made, you know, and I think that most things in our lives that we become unhappy with or irritated by in ourselves or in our lives, is just like, we can go back and think like, well, this is kind of the bet I made, you know, and you know, if I'm like, one of my things right now is like, and it has been for some time now, it's like my work schedule is very, very tough. It's gotten tougher as I've gotten older. But I look back and I'm like, well, but that was a decision I made, you know. It's like I chose not to go to college, which I don't take that in any way, shape, or form like I'm advocating for college, because I don't, and we can get into that discussion. I'm not saying that college is like evil in and of itself, or a bad in and of itself, but I think that it's, if you know what you want to do and college is needed for it, by all means. But I've seen too many people that go to college to quote unquote find themselves, or they don't know what they're going to do. They're kind of, because we were all fed in public schools like, you have to go to college. If you don't go to college, you're a failure. You know, we were all kind of
indoctrinated.
Brought up that way. But I think that there's so many options and things, and like I tell my kids, like, look, like, you don't for a second think that like I expect you to go to college. Because there's so many things that you can do. And who's, you know, some of the most successful people in our society are people that work with their hands, you know, plumbers and electricians.
Or people that have, just to what we're talking about, absolute gifts from God that know how to use those. And are extremely good at it.
Or entrepreneurs.
That have just figured out, or to your point, just freaking grind and work and work and work and have built something out of it, because they're like, I can't sit in the classroom. You know what I'm saying? I can't sit in an environment where I have to literally listen to someone tell me about a specific subject just to meet a certain criteria or check a box. When it has no bearing, at least in their mind, right? I'm not to exactly what you defended. It's like, there's certain things that, like, there's certain classes where I'm like, that was a freaking joke. But then there were others that had no bearing on my my schooling, but that were like, whoa, that yielded a ton of, like, if anything else, just life experience that taught me how to be better, right?
Yeah.
Like, if anything else, not even necessarily that the subject matter was good. It was more just it honed certain elements or shaved off certain corners that needed to be shaved,
Yeah. And that was my experience. And like, I hated school.
Yeah.
I did not like school. And I felt guilty / dumb for not liking school.
Again, because of the indoctrination.
Yeah, because it's like, it was like you were made to feel like, well, like you should go to college.
You don't have any other options, Rick.
You're not going to be successful if you don't, and I'm like, well, I make close to $100,000 a year.
It's like,
and I never went to college where, there's
plenty of people that are making 45.
Exactly. And that did go to college. Or I've even seen, associates of mine that got their degree but stayed at In-N-Out because either they couldn't find a job or because it just didn't pay as well, And so, I remember, I think when I really stopped, like got out of that mindset was listening to Rush Limbaugh, because he talked a lot about, like, he hated school. School wasn't for him. And he's one of the most brilliant people you'll ever listen to.
Sir, let me speak. Sir.
I'm appropriately smoking a cigar right now in my presently nicotine-stained fingers. But, going back to the, like, life as a product of the choices that we make, I was having a conversation this morning with a buddy, and this is something that I think about a lot, but just kind of thinking about, like, friends of mine who aren't Catholic, or maybe they are, but they're not practicing or Christian or anything. And, they're living with their girlfriends, and they've been living with their girlfriends forever.
Yep.
And I'm like, hey, when are you going to get married? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, you're practically already married. You've been living with her for this long. Like, what are you waiting for?
Yep.
But then I think about the flip side of that, and how many women in our society, it's like marriage isn't even really super valued anymore, but I think deep down it is, and some of these girls don't understand, like, why he just won't propose. It's like there was a girl at work, that I said something about her ring, like, because it was a nice big ring. I'm like, dang, like, it's a big ring. And she's like, yeah, it better have been. Like, we dated for 7 years. And I'm thinking, like, well, was that a choice that you made, though?
Agreed. Well, and my take on that, I was actually talking to Father Chica about this Wednesday night. It's a fascinating, I think to your point, it's two things, right? The masculinity of manhood, right, has been emasculated. So men, the standard by which those that are coming up behind us, and now I'm sounding freaking old in my own ears, but the standard's super low. No, like frankly, it's super low.
Yeah.
But then conversely, right? Like, so it's the perversion of complementarity, right? Where you have women that now are also willing to concede on a bunch of things that it's like, no, that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
Right? That, like, you should not concede on something like, well, he treats me better than all my other boyfriends, and it's like, and that's a standard?
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying you should find freaking Prince Charming, because that doesn't exist, right? But conversely, you should have high expectations. And guess what? If the dude is living with you and it continues to hem and haw over something like marriage, then they're probably never going to get married to you.
No.
Right? So it's like, why are you waiting around?
Well, and I'm thinking with that too, for a lot of these women that, like, are living with the boyfriend and are like, why won't he propose? Or how come we're not married?
You've already given him everything.
Yeah, because why would he?
Yeah. Like,
it's the old saying, and don't, please, I'm not calling women cows. It's just the saying, like, why buy the cow when you're getting the milk for free? You know what I mean?
No, but that's the reality.
It's like you've given them all the perks and benefits of a marriage, all while not requiring him to actually give you the commitment,
correct,
of marriage. And I think that you kind of hit a point there where, like, we have a huge problem in our society with effeminate men. And men, we hear it all the time. Like, men aren't men.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that. That's one of my biggest, like,
That's the main premise why this started.
yeah. But if we're being honest, it's like, it's going to get real dangerous getting into this the way I'm kind of coming about
It's a podcast, bro. Who cares?
Yeah, that's fine. Unfollow or unsubscribe, assuming there are subscribers. Hopefully there will be. But I think that, yes, men are very much at fault for men not being men. But women can't act like they're not to blame either. Like they don't have any role.
That's what I mean by the complementarity.
Yeah, they're not forcing men to be men.
Yep.
They're allowing. Think of a lot of men today. It's like what do they do with their time? They watch porn. They play video games.
Yep.
They go out to eat like super late night.
Yep.
They sleep in super late.
Yep.
You know, it's like they're not.
They freaking sit on their ass and don't do jack when they should be spending time with their kids, being active with their kids, investing in their kids, or investing in their own life if you're single.
Yeah, because I'm not even talking about married men. I'm talking about single men.
Yeah.
You know, but today's modern women aren't requiring that of men. So men have adapted to that. Yeah. If you scroll social media for 5 minutes, you see just the toxicity of our culture now. It's just that men aren't being required to be men. Yep. There's no standard of like, this is what you need to do to be married. Or, I mean, it used to be, I mean, in a civilized society and in a Christian society, then, you would remain chaste until you're married.
Yep.
And so there's something there that you're working towards. Yep. People tell me, like, my wife and I were engaged for 7 months and we dated for 11. So it was only a total of 18 months from the time, like, we, like, officially, like, got together to the time we got married. And people are like, man, that was quick. And I don't say this, but it's like, well, there's a reason. Because we were waiting for marriage to do the things that married couples do. Yep. So there is not going to be, we're going to date for 5 years and we're going to be engaged for 4. It's like, no, you want to enjoy certain things and get to that point. And if that was still a standard, we'd be in a better place. And, a lot of people also want to wait to get married until everything's right. We have our careers going and we have a house and all this stuff.
That's the reality. That's what I tell people. Yeah. I'm like, you are never going to find the perfect moment. You're going to always be confronted with something that is going to give you that slight door open to go, it's just not the right time. We don't have the house. Yeah. We don't have the right job. We're not far along in the career job that we actually, the dream job that we wanted, that we got, but we're not quite at the, the level that we want to be. It's like, well, when does that stop?
Well, a marriage just means so much more when it's something that you build together, I still,
like, to your point, I love when Jamie and I talk about and remember and reminisce about where we came from.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, literally just freaking scraping by.
Yeah, because like, you guys are in the same boat we were in. Yeah. You guys were nowhere near like set when you guys got married, and neither were we.
Yeah.
Kristen was, I think, had just finished up her degree, and she was like, had just finished up student teaching. I think her first year actually teaching was our first year of marriage.
Yep.
But there's something to be said for building a marriage together. I think that's why there's so much divorce now too, and prenups and all that kind of stuff, because you're already established. And so it's kind of like, I brought you into my already established life.
That's a good point. I've never thought about that.
Yeah, and you pissed me off, so now you don't deserve this. Get out. I still have my stuff, instead of like this life that you built
versus walking alongside each other and building stuff and looking, and again, the complementarity, going, look at what God has done in our life.
Yeah.
Look at what we've worked hard for by responding to the grace that God gives us in our marriage.
Yeah.
And there isn't this question of, well, I built this.
Yeah,
and now you, right? That's a really good point in terms of you have these two solitary people that come together and they're both established and they're both looking at each other. There's this quasi commitment because they do love each other, but then it's also, but I had this house before we met.
Yeah.
And you had this business before we met, whatever, take your pick of what it is.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that's freaking spot on.
We got married, man. Like I said, it was her first year teaching, but it was rough. I was still a cleanup guy within and out. We were just scraping by. I remember for her bridal shower, her grandma gave her a gag gift. It was a gag gift of a bag of like canned food, but it was called, like, on the bag it said "What's for dinner," and all the cans in the bag had all the labels ripped off. So it was supposed to be a gag gift of like, oh, you don't know what's for dinner because you opened up a can and you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most people who get that gift, they don't use it. It's just supposed to be funny. We used it. Like, we ate every can in that bag. Because I remember, and I don't think I've ever admitted this to anybody, and I hope Kristen doesn't kill me for telling this story. We were so broke in our early years. Like, I wouldn't even say living paycheck to paycheck, because it wasn't. I mean, that paycheck didn't even stretch far enough.
It was robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah. I would get paid on Thursdays, and we would Wednesday nights typically would order pizza and pay with a check, because it would take 2 to 3 days to clear. You can't do that anymore.
I love it.
But we'd have $0 in a bank account, but like, say, well, we get to eat pizza on the last day of the pay cycle because we don't have money. We were that in those first couple of years, we had a standard routine of, like, I think it was Tuesday nights we'd go to her mom's for dinner. Yeah. Wednesday nights we'd go to her dad's for dinner.
Yep.
Every, like, twice a month maybe we'd go to her grandma's. And yeah, it was nice to have like that family aspect. But if we're being honest too, and I hope her parents forgive me if they're hearing this, because it's not. But it was also kind of like, hey, it's a free meal we don't have to pay for.
That's not. I guarantee you, her and your parents combined, would be like, we loved having you guys.
No,
you know
absolutely.
What I'm saying? It's like, and they get it, right? Because I know for my parents, probably your parents, probably her parents, any solid people. Not even necessarily marriages, but solid people, right, that you meet, they come from humble beginnings.
Right.
And so, like, they have a very visceral, real reality of knowing what it's like to be there.
Yeah.
And so to know that they were a part of helping establish and get, help along the way, however small, quote unquote, it may seem, dude, it's huge. Wow. I think back to your point, though, like, on the whole, masculine, effeminate men, however we want to term it, masculine, toxic masculinity. Like it also, conversely, women are trying to push men because of feminism, right? This is the culmination of all this stupid feminist, like jargon and philosophy and bullshit, quite frankly, that's moved to this level by which they're trying to make men be not men. You know what I'm saying? In terms of, like, it's like, no, like, have you ever read Wild at Heart?
No, but I've heard of it.
Dude, you got to read it. Because it really draws out this element of men were meant to howl at the moon. We're meant to be adventurous. We're meant to be, like, wild and crazy and not, like, obviously once you get in a marriage, yes, that complementarity of the marriage is supposed to domesticate us at some level. But conversely, we're also supposed to pour that adventurous, kind of wild, crazy into our wives because they need that in their life, because it makes it, like, if your spouse does not see that, like, speaking as men, right? If your wife does not see the value in what you bring to the table, then they're not spouse material. You get what I'm saying? Like, they should be marrying you because of who you are, and maybe that does adjust over time, but there shouldn't be a, well, I'm really going to domesticate you and I'm going to put the halter on and kind of, and it's like, no. Like it should be, no, I want him to be who he is, because that's how God, one, has made him, and because I'm attracted to that too. More importantly, because it means that he's going to be the man that our daughters need to know that they want to find in their lives, if they're going to be, called to the vocation of marriage. But then too, the boys, more importantly, the boys that are eventually going to be men, have this model of someone who is wild, who is like crazy, who does things that it's like, what? Like, okay, I guess we're doing this. And then they realize, oh, yes, like, I want to do this stuff. But I didn't know that until my dad actually showed me, this is cool and this is fun and this is exciting. So
no, I like that. It reminds me of a lyric from Cody Johnson song where he's talking about his wife, and he says,
your man crush on Cody Johnson.
the line says she gets excited about all my crazy dreams, and that's beautiful. It's like, yeah, that's what a marriage should be. Yeah.
Do you need to relight?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Do you need to?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I think I can puff it out. Where were you born?
Fresno. Specifically at Fresno Community Hospital. There's not
too much exciting.
Not too much. I mean, I can make this. I can stretch this question out if you want me to, but I mean, just born in Fresno Community Hospital on Christmas Day of 1986.
Okay.
Yeah.
Christmas Day. What elaborate on that? Like, what's that been like? Kind of growing up through life, being born on a major Christian holiday. Pass me that lighter.
Yeah.
Please.
This is the spiel that I gave everybody when even, cashiers at the store, when they check my ID to buy alcohol. Oh, Christmas baby. I'm like, yeah, and I'm a twin too, so.
Suck it.
Well, no, it's more of a, people are like, oh, that must be cool. You get double presents. No, I don't. I didn't. I never did. And being a twin too, it's like, mom and dad don't have to just pay for one gift now. They have to pay for two. So
and you share that gift.
Yeah. Well, I remember having family friends that would come over Christmas, and I remember one year it was family friend. It wasn't anything like, they weren't super close or anything, but I think they gave us like. I got like a pair of socks or a pack of socks, and my brother got like a pack of shirts or something. And it was like, oh yeah, you guys share those, like split them up and share them, and it's like, yeah, well, that's kind of what life was kind of like growing up. Having, you only get presents one day a year instead of two, like everyone else did. I'd be watching everyone, and I was like, yeah, cool. You get to have presents again in 3 months. What's that like? But no, but it was good. But it's funny because I always joke that like my birthday's never really been about me, which is fine. I don't want to sound like I'm whining, but growing up, like I said, having a twin and it also being Christmas Day. But as I got older, it's like now it's like it's about the kids, and Kristen, my wife, has done a really good job of over the years making it a point to like remind her, like, hey, it's Dad's birthday too, and she makes it a big deal.
Nice.
Because early on, it's like the kids would be like, oh yeah, like it's like 5 p.m. on Christmas Day. Oh yeah, Dad, it's your birthday too, huh? Yeah, thanks for remembering. So
the side note.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's Dad's birthday.
Yeah. Dwight talking to Jim, come along, afterthought. So that's but that's kind of what it's been like growing up. But I mean, it's fine. I don't know any different, so I don't know what it feels like to have just a regular birthday, and I don't know what it feels like to not have a twin brother who I have to share that birthday with, but I don't think I would change it for the world, to be honest with you. And that's just kind of what life is.
Yeah. So you grew up in Fresno?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was that like?
Well, I grew up in the hood, so
okay. Describe the hood.
Oh man, I grew up on major cross streets were Kings Canyon and Chestnut.
Okay.
About a mile away from the Fresno Fair.
I didn't realize that it was that close to.
Oh yeah. It was interesting, and I got lucky by the time like I was in high school and older. I think there was a lot of gang activity on that side of town in the 90s.
Yep.
Like the Bulldogs were really rampant, and I heard stories of my older brother, 7 years older than me, and I've heard stories of him and my cousins like getting chased home by like Bulldogs who were trying to jump them into the gang.
Wow.
Things like that. You know? It was also, I'm sure, the circle of friends they surrounded themselves with, and I was never drawn to that lifestyle. Mm-hmm. I never wanted to be part of that. I never considered myself like hood or ghetto, or like I listened to rap music when I was in my teens because it was just what my brother listened to, but I always
it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, I still,
at that age,
still throw on a Dr. Dre or Eminem song from time to time just to hear the bass in my truck, but I never really resonated with that. You know? It was always more like kind of into like, just different like styles of music and different things that like drew me. I mean, even now, you know, like people at work joke, you know, one lady would joke, say that I'm her favorite redneck, you know, so I call myself a rednexican, you know. But yeah, you know, growing up in Fresno was definitely interesting. I always, because I never super like identified with that, like that kind of thinking or those kind of people.
Yeah.
Like growing up in public school and being around a lot of those kind of people, I never felt like I fit in.
Okay.
You know? And then
so would you say you were an outsider?
Yeah. Well, and not so much in elementary school, because we had a group of friends who we were like really into sports, you know. It's like recess, lunchtime, we'd be playing sports, and PE, we were like the best kids at, you know, at all the sports and just beating up on all the, but we never got to be on the same team because everyone's picking teams, and we'd always get split up because we were all, you know, like the sports kids. But as I got older, definitely. And then I remember, like, you know, by the time I got to middle school and didn't move out of the hood, because I lived there my whole life until I got married and moved out. But for middle school, I went to Computech Middle School, which was like a gate magnet school, where all the, you know, the...
so you're one of those smart ghetto kids.
yeah, I was smart ghetto guys. I'm smart, eh? You know, but, you know, but it was funny because so then I get to Computech, and now I'm going to school with like a bunch of nerdy white kids, you know, who were probably first and foremost like scared of me because I'm a big Mexican dude. But we also kind of got judged and made fun of a lot because, I mean, probably for being brown too, you know, but also we were kind of poor. And so, you know, we didn't have like the nice clothes. And a lot of kids that went to Computech were like upper class, you know,
interesting.
richer
were
kids.
They coming from Sunnyside area?
No, they were, a lot of them were like North Fresno.
Oh, wow.
I mean, Computech drew kids in
from everywhere.
From all over.
Okay.
Yeah. And so,
interesting.
Yeah, so like I said, I never truly fit in there either. And I think probably my favorite year of my public education was my freshman year of high school, because I went to Edison, which Computech fed into.
Okay.
And, you know, it was just kind of a year I'd finally like fit in with a group of friends, and that was the year like I started playing guitar.
Nice.
And, you know,
what year was this?
2000. That would have been 2000. 2001, because I was going to Edison when 9/11 happened.
Gotcha.
Which was just a crazy day.
I'm going to pause you right there.
Yeah.
The ambulance or police car that you hear in the background, we're not in the hood right now. So just
it's funny it's funny though that happens right as I bring up 9/11.
Yeah.
Because I remember that day, like waiting for the bus at the bus stop at in front of what used to be Save Mart on Butler and Chestnut.
Yep.
And that was our bus stop. And I remember I had a Sony Walkman, and I would always just have my earphones on. And I remember hearing all these sirens and stuff. And then we get on the bus, and I'd taken my headphones off just to get on the bus, you know, and say hi to friends or whatever. And whatever was playing on the radio, there were a bunch of sirens and stuff too. And I didn't put two and two together, but I just kind of thought it was related. I'm like, something's going on. You know, I threw my headphones on. And I remember getting off the bus at Edison, and my brother says to me, hey, they flew a plane into the Twin Towers. And I didn't really know what the Twin Towers were. I was like, I knew there was some buildings in New York, you know, but it wasn't until I walked into my first period of class and they had the news on, and I was like, what the heck is...
Yeah.
By that point, the second plane had hit.
Yep.
And I remember my sister pulled us out of school, like at lunchtime.
That's
because
crazy.
It was, I mean, we didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
That was the first time in my life I remember going to bed scared, legitimately not knowing, am I going to wake up tomorrow?
Yep.
You know, are we going to get attacked in the middle of the night?
What year in high school?
That was freshman year.
Yeah.
Freshman year in high school, yeah. So that was, you know, we all grew up that day.
Yeah.
And I remember the next day, the newspaper headline read, like, America's innocence stolen, or something like that. And that's exactly how I felt about it.
Yeah, it's a huge, dude, in my segment, whenever that comes up, sharing my life, I'll talk about it. But it was the first semester, first year at college.
Yeah.
When that happened, and I remember
where were you?
I was at Fresno State.
Oh, okay.
And I'd woken up. This will be funny to talk about, but I'd woken up, and I'll get super detailed more because this time is for you. But it was one of those things. Woke up at 6:30, for whatever reason, had thrown the TV on, and we're talking like old school, big, like not big in terms of size, but those blocky square ones, the projected TVs, not the flat screens that we have now.
Oh yeah.
Like threw it on. It was like a 18 by 18, tiny little thing, and saw the first one and was like, what the heck? And then all of a sudden, like, was getting like these notifications, I think via phone call, because it was right when like the stupid Nokia like brick phones were like a thing. I had one of those, and it was
you
like,
probably have one somewhere that still has battery left
for sure. But do not come to campus. There were like, I think F-16s or F-18s. I don't remember historically what the Air Force was using at that time, but they were doing flyovers like all over Fresno.
Yeah,
and it was like full alert, like we were like literally just ready for anything.
I remember tripping out because I knew that the FAA had shut down like the country's airspace, and I remember seeing jets and airplanes fly over, and you knew that they were military or something. Like there's no way they were anything else because airspace was completely shut down. That was a crazy day, a very pivotal day, I think, and you would probably agree. In just our lives, that was the day everything changed, and it's such a trip now. Like that, I work with kids who were born after that, who don't even remember. And of course, I mean, our kids, same thing. But
totally,
remember the first time I was hiring a kid, and I was punching in his license, and his birthday was like January of 2000 or maybe even 99.
Yeah.
And I was like,
oh, you're too young.
And so I was like, dude, do you even remember 9/11? And he was like, nah, man. He goes, I've heard about it.
Yeah.
He goes, I've seen like, my parents talk about it and stuff.
The only thing he knows is what history books say.
And I'm just like, dude, like that's just so weird because for people our age, like that was
for me, like it was a pivotal decision point because I was this close to signing up with the Marines. I remember distinctly looking at the nearest place that I could enlist.
Yeah.
Thanks be to God I didn't. I probably would have died, honestly. And I'm very, very thankful because I'm super, super into military. You know that.
Yeah.
And just understanding military history, understanding warfare, all that. But now, kind of looking back retrospectively, like it was a God thing that I didn't.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that was that happened my freshman year at Edison, but that was one of my favorite years. And like I said, like I felt like finally starting to fit in, and but I mentioned I'd started playing guitar that year.
Okay.
And so, which was I think in February of my freshman year. And
what inspired you starting to play?
So I always wanted to play guitar growing up. I remember like we'd go to these meetings growing up. My mom we grew up going to all kinds of meetings like with church, like prayer groups kind of things.
Yeah.
But they would be at people's houses, which is kind of cool when you think about it, because it's like it was very early church feel to it.
Yep. And
Bible studies and stuff. But then there would always be like the worship, and it was the one guy with the nylon string guitar and just really horrible, just post-Vatican II Spanish music. De colores. I don't know if you've heard that song.
Oh, I've heard it.
Yeah. But I remember I always just kind of liked...
If you live in California, who hasn't heard that song?
Yeah. And so I remember I would always watch the guys who play guitar, and I always thought it was super cool. And one of them one time kind of did a guitar class, and so my mom had bought us a guitar, and we went.
What kind of guitar?
It was like a Yamaha nylon string.
Nice.
And we went, but we never stuck with it. We didn't do it. And so years later, freshman year at Edison, my buddy Jose is like, hey, I started taking guitar lessons. And I'm like, oh, man, I've always wanted to play. And he's like, oh, you should go, like, guitar lessons with me. And I was like, well, my parents are never going to go for that. Like, we were pretty broke, and also I just didn't think it was going to happen. But I was like, well, I have a guitar. What if I just bring it to school and you just teach me what you're learning every week? He's like, yeah. I'm like, let's do that. So I go and bust out this old nylon guitar that my mom had bought, and it still had the stickers on it, like little circle stickers with, like, the Holy Spirit doves or something that... the stickers marked the C chord, I remember, because we had put stickers, like, to mark the chord. And so I brought that and took it to school. And I remember my mom, but my mom wasn't, most parents are like encouraging and, oh yeah, like you, and my dad was more that way. But I remember I break out the guitar and my mom was like, what are you breaking that out for? And I told her, I was going to start playing with my buddy and stuff. And she's like, yeah, that'll last a week.
Wow.
And so that kind of lit a fire in me of like, no, you know what? Now I'm going to learn how to play guitar to prove her wrong,
Yeah.
So
such a middle child or kind of middle child response, it's like, oh, okay, watch me.
Yeah. So, but then I started playing guitar, and that just consumed all of my time.
Yeah.
So when all I did was play guitar, I just naturally didn't do homework, stopped doing homework, and go into a magnet school that you had to have good grades to be in. Well, guess what happened when I got 4 Fs that semester? I got kicked out, and I got sent to my home school, which was again in the ghetto, Roosevelt High School, and so now back to just at a ghetto school, not fitting in. I hate this. Like, this sucks. My brother got kicked out too, so at least we had each other. But so
same reason or different reasons? Same
reason. His grades weren't very good. Yeah. I think his were a little better than mine, but they gave us the boot. And it was what it was.
Yeah.
But so I hated those last 3 years of high school. Just didn't fit in. So just kind of going back to your question of like what like was I?
We're learning.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations where you got to make sure that your laptop is plugged in properly. So
these damn magnet chargers on these Apple products. I guess it's probably better if it's just like that and you accidentally step on it. It's not going to do damage to the cord or two.
Yeah, but like to your point, like it looked like it was in there all the way, and it wasn't. For the listener, apologize. I had some technical difficulties. We'll just put it like that, or just idiot. Move. So
user error. No.
Basically. So Rick, you cut off, kind of had to, you were basically kicked out of Computech.
Edison.
Sorry.
Edison Computech.
Yeah. Computech, Edison Computech.
It was, the school was called Edison Computech. It was kind of weird, too, because it was, so Computech was strictly a magnet gate school. You're reminding me right now of Big Daddy when the kid's sleeping and he's trying to chew real quiet. And the kid wakes up.
Dude, I love chicharrones.
Yeah. And, you'd think I'd be the one eating them.
I'm more Mexican than you are, bro.
Yeah. Eli.
Elias.
Computech was strictly a gate school, but Edison was a hybrid where there was the Computech, Edison Computech, it was the Computech students, but there were also local kids that went to that school that weren't in like the gate programs or whatever.
Gotcha. So it was in feeding to those that
it was their local school,
yes,
but
exactly.
it's super weird. And I don't know if it's still that way. I don't know. Who knows? But Edison is on like Martin Luther King Boulevard in West Fresno.
Which in any town in U.S. is typically not the nicest part of town.
So, there was, it was funny. There was a lot of black kids at Edison.
Yeah.
And not to say anything, but I mean, there was a lot of, it was just more ghetto for sure. But it was good. It was good. I enjoyed it. There were a lot of fights. I remember that.
Okay.
And but there were a lot of fights at Roosevelt too. Yeah. So, but yeah, got kicked out of there and sent back to Roosevelt, which was our home school. But that was also, in the hood, not really the ghetto, but the hood. And so that's, we hated it there. Didn't fit in there either, so we just kind of wound up just playing guitar on the courtyard and, wherever we could. But
so you were sharing off mic at one point that when it had cut off, that guitar really, that decision to start playing guitar really led to really where we're at now, right?
Yeah.
Like you and I would never have met.
No.
You and Father Jacob would never have met.
Yeah.
Kind of elaborate on that, because that was post when the recording was going on.
I can retell the story, but that was February of 2002.
Okay.
When we started playing guitar, and that November was our first retreat, and just kind of where I had like just my big conversion. I grew up Catholic and was a cradle Catholic. And it's funny you hear the stories of, like, I was listening to Tim Staples recently, and he said something that was kind of funny, because it's like he said that a lot of cradle Catholics will like tell him like, oh, I'm so jealous of like your conversion and all that kind of stuff. Because for us cradle Catholics, we never had like that big conversion.
Big mountainous, yeah.
We grew up in the faith.
Yep.
And he's just like, well, I'm jealous of you who grew up with this.
Yeah.
The entire time, we had the advantage of the sacraments and everything from an early age, so I grew up Catholic. I mean, going to Mass was never an option. We went to Mass, and I remember being a kid, my dad he suffered a massive stroke in 98 that was like, he was permanently disabled after that. Luckily, it was a stroke that affected his physical mobility and not his brain function. So
Nice.
He was still very, very much, competent, aware, cognizant. But I remember being a kid when he worked, he didn't go to Mass. And my mom, for some reason, didn't drive yet. I remember my mom pushing us to Mass in a shopping cart, and it was like a 2.5 miles away from the house, but she would push us in a shopping cart from Safe Mart down the street, and take us to Mass. So that's how I grew up. It's like Mass wasn't an option. So I grew up with all that, but I mean, I never really had like a one-on-one encounter with Jesus where I experienced him in a real way like I did on that retreat, through adoration and all the stories and confession. I mean, a lot of us we'd never experienced anything like that. Mm-hmm. And it was, I think it was in a cutoff when I talked about Father Darren, who had been assigned to our church that summer, and he brought in like the Life Team program, and started all that. So it was like confirmation / Life Team. And then he had found out somewhere along the way that like my brother and I played guitar, and one of our good buddies played drums. We were actually like trying to start a band like that summer before all the Life Team stuff. And I remember our band name was Fate's Arrival. And I had this whole like cool idea of like our concert was going to have this cool intro video, and it was going to end with like, this is the arrival of your fates, and then like the opening chord would hit to whatever our song. But yeah, Fate's Arrival.
You had the arena already dialed in your mind.
Yeah, and I was a huge Creed fan, so like Arena Rock was like my first concert was a Creed concert in Bakersfield, 2002, awesome. And I remember just there were fireworks, and it was just. Anyway, so I just that was what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a rock star. That's what drew me in. Little did I know that the Lord was going to call me to music, but not in that way. So we started playing at church, and we eventually wound up at St. Anthony of Padua because our youth minister from the church I was at went over there, and then so she brought us over, and we were kind of doing music at both, and I started dating this girl there, and then we broke up, and we stopped going there, not because of that, but just, other reasons. And so I remember my buddy Adam was talking to a girl from there too, and he wanted to go to their life night one Sunday, like to see her. And I didn't want to go because I was like, no, I'm going to run into my ex there. And but he dragged me, and we went and took our guitars. And, so after the life night was over, we started, just playing guitar and whatnot. And Father Jacob comes over. I didn't know him yet,
Not Father Jacob at this point. Jacob.
He was just Jacob,
Yeah.
And just this just kind of weird kid comes over who's just really interested in I was playing Matt Maher stuff, and he was like, "Is that Matt Maher?" And it's like nobody else knew who Matt Maher was
at this point.
It was 2000. That would have been 2005. So I mean, people knew who he was, but not here, not really.
Right.
And
he hadn't made the jump to Providence label group, and
he hadn't even come out with Overflow yet.
Yeah.
I remember going to. I'm ashamed to admit that I went to a LA Religious Education Congress.
Which was as bad as it was then as it is now.
Father James Martin probably teaches at those things now. But anyways, but I remember going to one of those. I went to a couple because the at St. Anthony Claret they would send all the catechists to the RE Congress in LA. And I remember one year in particular, like Matt Maher was going to be there, and I knew who he was.
Yep.
I don't even remember how I discovered him, but I discovered him like right, he had just come out with Welcome to Life or whatever. But I remember he was going to be doing this concert, like this lunchtime concert with like him and Steve Angersano, and I don't remember who else. Yeah. And it was like in the arena portion of it, and I remember going, and he played two songs. He played Jesus is My Everything, and he played Your Grace Is Enough. But it was funny, being there because nobody really knew who he was.
Yeah.
There were some people that you could tell did, but I felt like I was like one of like maybe 20 people singing along.
But it wasn't people showing up to see him.
No, not anything like later on down. And just like the next year or 2 years later,
it's like
when he had just released Overflow and he's doing like a autograph meet and greet, and the line was super long, and it was crazy how much he blew up. But anyway, when Father Jacob comes up to me and so we kind of bonded over like Matt Maher, and we're just nerding out over Matt Maher. And then he friends me on MySpace, and then we just talked for months on MySpace. Never saw each other. But we talked for months, and I remember he was going to Holy Spirit, and he was in Life Team there, and so I kind of saw as him as my connection to maybe branching out, maybe I'll eventually go start leading worship at Holy Spirit, But I mean, not to say that I was using him for that, because we legitimately got along and we're really good friends and still are to this day. I remember I would post blogs. Where I would just kind of just talk about the faith and different things, and there was one blog in particular that I posted. I think it was during Christmas time, and he messaged me afterwards and said, "Hey, like, I printed out the blog you wrote, and I showed it to my youth minister, who was Martha Perry." He was like, and she read it like at the Life Night today. I was like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah,
I've never been in this church, and you guys are.
You could have given me a heads up.
Reading my stuff. Yeah. No, I thought it was cool. Sure. I was like, "Oh wow, like that's awesome," So of course I felt like a bigger deal than I probably was, but. But eventually he got a job at the Holy Child, which was, for the listeners, the Holy Child was a Catholic bookstore on Palm and Bullard here in Fresno. There was like a half bookstore, half coffee shop, but it was such a cool place, and so God was moving in that place, definitely, because that's where I met you. Father Jacob got me the job there because he'd gotten hired, and he got me hired there. But I mean, we met a lot of our close friends even to this day, and I talk about, it's funny because I do music for these retreats with Holy Cross Ministries, and this couple, they're dairy farmers, or not dairy farmers, I think pistachio farmers, I forget exactly what, out in Riverdale. But the lady Veronica,
most likely dairy if it's Riverdale.
but no, it's not dairy. It's,
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's I forget what I hope they don't listen to this because they're going to get offended that I don't remember. But Veronica is Brenda's cousin.
Oh.
And Brenda was the owner of the Holy Child.
Yeah.
And so she talks about it, and she's like, man, like, you know, Brenda really needed that place because
interesting.
she bought the Holy Child right after her husband had passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about that. And she also talks about how much money that she lost in that place because she did.
Yep.
But I just tell her, like, that was a total God movement because, you know, how, like, what,
look at all the vocations that came out of it.
3-4 priests came out of that place. I mean, you met Jamie there. I met Kristen there. Seth and Christine met there.
Yep.
Matt met Stacy there.
Stacy met there. Yep.
And I'm talking names here, like, some listeners might not know who I'm talking about, but it's fine. All of that to say that just
there's a core group of people that really it set a different trajectory again.
And I don't think Brenda, it probably isn't even aware of that, which is fine. She doesn't need to be, but I don't think she has any idea how much, like, God used her financially in that time to support something that God was using for just so much bigger.
Just taking a guess, I haven't connected with her. This would be a fascinating thing to do, to like reconnect with her and have discussion like retrospectively. But I'll bet you, to your point, like when I was in it, I don't think I was connecting the dots that you just connected in terms of she needed something to focus on and to do that was going to bring joy to her heart and kind of keep her at some level, as bad as this sounds, like distracted from like her husband dying and all that. And I think it would be awesome for her to hear, you know, she's got to hear some, you know, second, third hand knowledge somehow. I mean, the valley is small. As much as it's big, it's also small. And especially in terms of Catholicism, it's even smaller. Yeah. So there's gotta, like, she's got to know at some level, but it would be cool for her to see the fruits of what she did, you know.
A lot came out of that place. And, you know, I'm sure there were days where she was thinking, what am I doing? Just throwing money down the drain. But
absolutely.
You know, a lot of fruit came out of there. So yeah, like, you know, like I was saying, you know, Father Jacob got me the job there, and that's where, you know, I met my wife, and I met you, and I met Matt, and you know, just a lot of really good friends. Father Michael met there, you know. A lot of the people that are still very key figures in my life, and that would have never happened. Like I was saying, you know, it's just the little things in life. Like I mentioned, like, a ripple in the ocean turns into a wave, you know, and you never really know until you look back and you really, like, reflect on your life of how much little things made such a huge impact, or where you would be today if it wasn't for those little things. But yeah.
Nice.
You still have that lighter?
I do. All right, so we talked through basically adolescence and... Sorry, brother.
You're good.
It was a good throw. Terrible catch, though.
Yeah, you're right. Adolescence and yeah, I mean, we could keep talking.
Yeah, so we worked through adolescence. We kind of talked a little bit about early adulthood, but what, like, I guess that's actually a good kind of movement into what are, I guess, 3 or 4 stories, because that was kind of early adulthood for you, right? Like working at the Holy Child.
Yeah, I mean, I was 19 or 20, I think, when I got hired there. Yeah, or very early adulthood, and just a very formative. Yeah. It was just, I've considered myself so blessed that was my entry into adulthood, you know, with just some good, solid people. And yeah.
Elaborate.
Well, I mean,
what are like explain one of the big memories that I have, like, and what's funny is I honestly think I was always either coming into as you guys were leaving, or leaving as you guys were coming in, but just kind of work through some cool stories about. So we were obviously all working at this, coffee shop / bookstore.
And
but
drinking and eating all the profits.
Yeah. That for sure was happening. But the discussion, smoking cigars, smoking pipes, kind of reminisce on some of the key moments there in that space.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I started working there, I got so many stories about that place, but, Father Jacob got me the job, and just right off the bat, everyone was, for the most part, nice and friendly and welcomed me in. I remember Sean and I becoming really good friends, who introduced me to cigars. Yeah. But I remember I was visiting my older brother in Roseville. He lived up there at the time, and I'd gone up there, and I'd planned to stay till Thursday and come back home. And Tuesday night, I get a phone call, and it was Sean. And I'd only been working there for a couple months. And, hey, man, it's Sean. How you doing? I'm like, oh, what's up? And I'm, excited because I'm like, oh, someone from the Holy Child who, is calling me, And at first I thought maybe he wanted to switch shifts, but then he's, just trying to talk, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And I'm like, oh, he wants to hang out.
Nice.
He's like, yeah, I was going to go to the beach with my sister and her fiance, and, I kind of don't really want to go solo, looking for a buddy to go. And I'm like, dude, this is... Yeah, heck yeah,
Yeah.
So I got up early the next morning to drive back to Fresno, and got here at 8 in the morning, and he picked me up at my house, and we went to the beach. I had smoked my first cigar in that car on the way there. Nice. I remember we got pulled over because that was when he was firefighting in Huron. Okay. And so he wanted to show his sister and her fiance the firehouse. So we stopped in Huron and we checked out the firehouse and whatnot. And then we're leaving there, and we're back on the road, and it's like a street road. Okay. Just driving down Fowler or any of these streets. And this dude's doing 75 miles an hour. Oh. Because you remember Sean was just reckless.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, dude, are you sure it's cool for you to be going that fast? He's like, oh, yeah, it's, do it all the time. And I was like, well, there's a cop right behind you. And he goes, what? And he looks in the rearview mirror, and he's like, oh, shit. Blue and reds. Here we go. So talking about times I got pulled over. And so the cop walks up, and he's talking to him, how fast you were going, and blah, blah. And Sean's kind of messing with him, and I'm just like, dude, what are you doing, Yeah. And he's just like, yeah, what's up, Gil? The guy's name was Gil. I don't know why I remember that. And Gil looks down, and because he hadn't seen his face, but he looks down, he sees him, and he's like, Sean, what the hell, dude, And so they knew each other from there.
Knew each other.
And I just remember he's just like, get the fuck out of here, And I'm like, how the hell did you get out of that fat ticket that was coming your way, But that was Sean, so that was a fun story. But yeah, I was smoked my first cigar in that car ride, and then that was the first time I ever went to Avila Beach, and so him and I hit it off, and we got really close, and we'd smoke cigars, but he got me going to daily mass at the cathedral, because him and I would work I think at the time was 6 to 12 shift, because we'd come in early and he'd bake, or I'd bake all the baked goods, and then we'd work our shift, and we were constantly your wife Jamie would be the one who would come in and work the 12 to 5, because there was a 6 to 12, a 12 to 5, and a 5 to 10, or 5 to 11. I think it was 5 to 10 then. But Jamie, and I think constantly it was Natalie, and probably someone else, but remember would come in and work the 12 to 5, and we were always hitting up Jamie
hey, can you hang out just a little bit longer?
Yeah, can you start 15 minutes early? We want to go to mass, And I'm sure she got annoyed of us at some point, but she's like, you guys are going to go to mass smelling like tobacco, and but it was cool because all these things that growing up to me were taboo, drinking alcohol and smoking cigars and things like that my mom still hates to this day. Yeah. But I got to experience them in, dare I say, a holier aspect. And
well, in the proper aspect.
Yeah, not in
Yeah.
a, hey, let's get wasted and drunk and smoke. And, it was just kind of a very Padre Pio. I mean, most of the cigars we were smoking, we were talking about the theology and
Truths of the church.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is kind of cool. It's funny, like side story, Manny, our buddy Manny, texted me the other day because we kind of got him going on this first fruits thing, which we still need to talk about, but
well, later time.
Yeah. And so he texts me and says a picture of us. He has this rosary in one hand and a cigar on his balcony. And he's like,
Nice.
I prayed my morning rosary while having a cigar. Not sure quite how I feel about it yet. And I said, dude, that's the most Padre Pio thing I've ever heard.
Totally.
And again, no coincidences with God. That was on Padre Pio's feast day.
Nice.
I was like, dude, yeah, you're good.
But to your, again, not to derail this podcast is about your life, but I think it's important because we are, right? Like my own upbringing, there was kind of and it wasn't intentional. I don't want to say this about my parents at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just more of like, oh, these things don't coincide, right? The reality is that they do, and we should, right? Like we should incorporate them because it does create a healthy respect of, it's not bad to drink.
Right.
It's bad to drink in excess.
Yeah.
And there is a time and place to drink, and there is a time and place to not.
Right.
Right? Now, yeah, I mean, that like, that's it, I guess, in a nutshell, right? Like, but the reality is in our young mind and then pubescent mind and then early adulthood, it's like this collision of like, whoa, I can pray a rosary and smoke a cigar.
Yeah.
Or I can talk about theology
While enjoying
a beer, right? Or while enjoying whiskey or scotch, right?
Yeah.
Like I can do these things. And in fact, it elevates it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're able to laugh and joke and have really robust, passionate discussions about things that you legitimately aren't there to get trashed, to your point.
Yeah.
And yet you're also enjoying really good things, right? Like it's good fruit of the earth that we should, partake in.
And I think, I always thought that was kind of more of a, like the Mexican upbringing. There's a lot of Puritanism.
Oh, interesting.
I think in like Mexican Catholicism,
Okay.
and not Puritan like in the traditional sense, but it's
like
more
American Puritan, like the Christian denomination.
No, I think a lot of it stems from like people might get mad at me for saying this, but just alcoholism is very rampant in Mexican men.
Yep.
And it used to be, I'm sure it still is.
Yeah.
But like my dad was an alcoholic before I was born.
Yeah.
A lot of Mexican men are. You know, they go to work, they come home, they drink.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of other bad things lead, but, so my mom always had an aversion to that. And he also smoked cigarettes.
Naturally, right?
Yeah,
because it's a perversion, right? That is a sin, like it's becoming something that's sinful at that point. But again, that's a distorted
right. But they
version,
never experienced it in a tempered sense of like, no, you can have a beer, have 2 beers, have a good time. Yeah. I remember someone told me once, like growing up, like, oh yeah, like Father whoever was at like, the party we had, and he had a beer, and I was scandalized. Like, what? Like, I didn't think they were allowed to. But so I got introduced to this, like,
that's
doing
crazy.
It in a healthy way that
crazy.
was okay, you know. And so that's kind of like, so Sean and I hit it off, and we'd smoke a lot of cigars. Not really alcohol yet, because I wasn't 21 yet, and I didn't really drink before I turned 21. But we had a lot of cigars, but we'd go to daily mass at the cathedral a lot, and we would also, and then we'd come back and just hang out.
Yeah,
I'd go to work at 6 a.m, and I'd be there till the place closed down at 10. Go home at midnight, come back and do it all again the same day.
Yeah.
But we'd come back and hang out, and we'd get lunch and smoke a cigar, and then, just different people throughout the day who would come in, and we'd hang out with everybody and play chess.
Yeah.
And then at night after dinner, like, hey, you want to go down to the adoration at St. Anthony of Padua, the perpetual adoration chapel. And so it was just a lot of that, and it kind of taught me a lot about my faith and just different things. And, it was a time where I learned how to do a lot of those things and go to daily mass and go to adoration and just different things. And it led to like another story about the Holy Child. Well, my Holy Child years was when I met my wife. She never worked there, but her roommate did. Her roommate, Anna.
Okay.
And so Anna and I worked together a lot.
Yeah.
But Anna would come in with Kristen, my wife. They were both going to Fresno State, and they'd come in and study.
Yep.
And, I was attracted to Kristen, and one day just, hey, what's up with your roommate? Like, what's the deal? And, she's like, oh, like, yeah, you should totally talk to her. You guys would click, She's like, she's not Catholic, but she's, like, interested in coming into the church, and she actually, like, just kind of went through, like, a party phase in college, and she's, like, getting out of that and whatnot. And so, we just kind of, one of the times she came in, I just started talking to her, and, and we just kind of, little by little, just started hanging out and talking. And I was at a point where I was really trying to take to heart a lot of the conversations that I had with a lot of you guys there, where I was like, well, I need to discern. And that was a concept that was, like, new to me. Like, I'd never really thought about that. I wasn't raised with a lot of those kind of, like, notions of Catholicism. Growing up in, like, Mexican Catholicism is just different, but
it's cultural more than anything else.
Yeah, I think it is, and that's a whole different rabbit hole we could get into. But I just remember thinking, like, okay, I need to pray for discernment, and I need to pray for God to show me, like, what my vocation is, and if she's the one for me.
Yeah.
So I remember someone gave me the idea of, like, oh, you should pray a novena.
Yeah.
And I remember I just decided, and I didn't choose any specific novena. I just kind of came up with my own. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the Adoration Chapel for 40 straight days and pray a rosary every day.
Nice.
And I figure if by the end of those 40 days, I still feel this way about this girl, then that's God telling me, yeah, pursue this.
That's cool. Where did you get the idea for 40 days and rosary? Or did you just...
I don't know. Just
awesome.
40 days is always just kind of a big...
I mean, it's a huge... Like Jesus, disappearing 40 days in the desert.
And novena, traditionally, novena comes from the Latin... The Latin root of it is like the number 9.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to just do 9 days. That seemed too weak to me, So I figured, I'm gonna do 40 days. And so
I'm gonna be hardcore to hardcore.
I did, and there were days that her and I would hang out, and it was within those 40 days, and I'd be like, hey, you want to go to adoration? And we'd go, even though she wasn't Catholic yet, but she was starting to understand it.
Yep.
And I'd be there praying my rosary, and she had no idea what it was. And over those 40 days, that rosary, like, beads broke off of it, and because I was wearing that thing out, but it just things just kept going well. To at the end of those 40 days, like on the 40th day, I made sure that she went with me, and in the parking lot, like, I told her what I'd been doing, and I gave her that rosary.
Nice.
And I said, this is for you, like, and this is basically like what I've been praying for. And she wasn't quite ready yet. You know, and we can, that's a whole other story, because we kind of had some ups and downs there. Where she wasn't ready yet. She was. I think I was the first, like, guy in her life that was not looking for. What most men are typically looking for. I was actually trying to pursue this from a holy standpoint, and she didn't quite know how to react to that or deal with that. So it took some time. But that was kind of, it took us a long time we still, after that, probably didn't I didn't officially ask her to be my girlfriend for probably still another 4 or 5 months after that. So that was another. Yeah, you asked me to expand on the Holy Child, but there's just so many cool stories. Even like the first shift I ever worked with Father Michael, he told me he was scared of me, because I was like this big, scary looking Mexican dude, and he'd never been south of Shaw, until he was like 18.
I didn't know this. He was scared of you.
He was. He told me. He's told me the story. He was scared of me. Like our first night working together, he thought I was just intimidating, and he's like, I didn't know you were cool until you were like, hey man, you want to get a pizza or something, like around dinner time. He's like, and then I was like, oh, he's fine, But yeah, it's just, dude, there's just so many cool stories and cool people there. But
Rick's a big teddy bear, Michael.
yeah. But he didn't know that. I don't know what he thought I was going to do to him. So
he thought you were going to take him south of Shaw.
Okay, so there is a story there.
Okay,
because. there was one day that for some reason, like, actually, I think him and Jacob and I went to Mass at the Cathedral. And if you remember, Jacob went to Edison. He was like a senior at Edison.
Yep.
And he would always rave about Chris's Meat Market, which is near Edison.
Yep.
And like the burritos there. And so we went to lunch at Chris's Meat Market. And I remember Father Michael just...
I don't think I've been there still.
Yeah. Oh, they were good.
I think you guys always talked. Is it not there anymore?
Probably. I don't know.
Okay.
I have no idea. But it was in the ghetto.
Okay.
And Father Michael was definitely nervous. I remember driving back. We took like the little city streets, and somehow we wound up like underneath the overpass, like of Golden State somewhere. Like it was rough. Like we literally turned down like a side road and witnessed a drug deal like happen right in front of us. And I just remember like the look on Father Michael's face,
like,
you know. And I mean, Jacob had been around it, so he didn't, you know. And I grew
like
up
just
around
another
it.
day under Golden State.
Yeah, and we were in Jacob's dad's little S10.
Yeah.
So Michael's in the back seat, and I'm driving, and Jacob's in the anyway. But yeah, and I remember that. I remember I was talking to both of them, and I was like, for whatever reason, I don't remember why I asked them like if they'd ever had girlfriends, and they both were just like, no, you know. And I kind of was like, you ever talk to a girl? Like, they're like, no, you know. And I was like, I remember that was the first time that I kind of thought like, you know, there's something different about these guys. Not in a bad way.
No. Yeah,
but then when I found out that, you know, graduating out of high school, Michael at the time was going to seminary. And Jacob, it took longer because he went to Steubenville and then he came back. And then he went to Berkeley for a while. And then it wasn't until, you know, he moved to Texas and then he suddenly, like, because I remember I'd ask him, like, what are you going to do? And he didn't know I think he wanted to be a math teacher, you know, but eventually.
I remember that. I remember him being, like, he's very math-oriented.
Very math-oriented. Yeah. And then I remember the day he texted me and said, "Oh, I'm going to the seminary," you know. And it's just funny now because seeing him now as a priest, like, it just makes sense.
Yep.
Like that is absolutely what he's called to. When I went last year and we did that men's retreat out there, and just seeing him with his people, just such a pastor in the truest sense of the word. I remember he asked me like, he's like, "So what? You know, now that you see me out here with my people, like, what are your thoughts?" And I said, "Dude, honestly, like." As cheesy as it's going to sound, like you're exactly where you need to be. Yeah. We're exactly where God called you to be. Like it just makes sense. Yep. You know? So it's cool to see.
Again, the fruit that yeah. And it's funny because it, I think like just perspective for me is also in our minds. I don't know how to describe it other than like often there's this allure of, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but it's like, oh, I want to, I'm meant for greatness. I'm meant for these things, right? And that greatness, a lot of what you talked about, where it's like, oh, we started this band, and I had this elaborate, like show,
I was gonna be a rock
planned
star.
out. Yeah,
this
like
is the arrival of your fate.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, right? But how awesome is it that, like, when you see him in the environment that God has absolutely destined him for at this present moment, right? Yeah. And he may be destined, and most likely is destined for more and different, you know, but he needs this now in order to get him ready for whatever is next. Yeah. It's just cool. Like, to me, it's really, really cool. And I think it takes a little bit more, turns around the sun, so to speak, to really actually look at that and appreciate that, right? Because like if someone showed me where I'm at or where you're at when I was in my 20s, I probably would have been like, that looks really freaking kind of just, and boring and dumb, but it's not. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's
well, life just leads you down just really weird. Yeah.
Weird is a good word. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't think you and I never, like, didn't get along, but it's not like we were really, like, super great friends or anything like back in those days.
I think with the group as a whole, Seth Sheldon and I got along, like, pretty well. Yeah. And I can't tell you why. I really can't, other than maybe just proximity of age, right? Like, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
But I also was in this weird predicament of I was managing it, remember?
Right.
And so that did create a little bit of, like, I wasn't great at it.
But it created tension, though,
But
too.
it created tension.
Because people naturally don't like authority. And it's like, here comes this new guy, which you'd worked there before, but none of us were around for that.
No, exactly.
So it's like, here comes this new guy, and now he's our boss.
Yep.
And there's this natural just kind of like, who the F does this guy think he is?
Yep.
You know? And there was just some tension there, but it was funny because I would have never imagined, like, you and I sitting here today, you know, or you living a couple miles down the street from me, and us being as close as we are, and having this group of friends that's just really close. And you know, I've never told you this, but I think when I really realized, like, how much our friendship meant, and when I realized, like, damn, Eli's actually, like, somebody I consider like a close friend, was when you had your heart attack.
Yeah.
I remember sitting there in bed, like just kind of, I mean, because Kristen told me, and going to my room and just laying there in bed and just praying. And I was just like, I was like, I don't want him to die.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know. That was the day that I was just like, damn, I never realized how much this person meant to me.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, it's just kind of crazy. Like, the way, like, the roads life leads you down. I mean, back in those days, even though Jacob got me hired, him and I were always cool, but, you know, we kind of drifted apart. I got really close with Mike Mendoza. That was my best friend at that time.
Yep.
You know, and it's like, now I don't even talk to him anymore.
Yep.
But I talk to Matt.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I don't. I kind of know what he's up to, but, like, to your point, I haven't. And that's not on him. It's a mutual thing. It's like we just never stayed connected or, you know, reached out to each other. Because to your point, like, we were literally seeing each other for every week at least, if not two times a week, you know, Sundays and Wednesday nights for a good 4 or 5 years. So it was like, it wasn't like there wasn't a tightness there. It was more just, I think, to your point, it was by virtue of just that we really were tight. And then once the music, you know, kind of turned, or that didn't become what it was. And ultimately, I'm thankful, right? For a while there, I was very bitter about it. But I think that, to your point, like, friendships are either meant or they're not. I'm kind of a lot in that camp. And I think a lot of us, I don't know where you stand on this, but for me, Jamie and I have had this conversation. I'm super of the mind of I'd much rather have a few very deep relationships than a lot of acquaintances. Yeah. You know, because it's like I just don't like the energy spent on trying to maintain a bunch of, you know, like, quasi relationships instead of actually having people that hold me accountable, that are going to challenge me in the ways that I need to be challenged.
Well, it's funny because...
And that reciprocates, meaning I'm comfortable enough to say, hey, we need to talk about this, you know, you know, it works both ways because there's a trust factor there. So.
Definitely. No, I was just going to say it's funny too, because I don't feel like, you and I have ever purposely tried to do the same things or roll in the same circles, but God has always made it happen that way. You know, it's like we were in the band at Holy Spirit together, and then, you know, and then, you know, just being in kind of the same circle and group of friends, which a lot of that too is credited to our wives, who, even when you and I maybe didn't talk as much, but they did, and you know, then you guys moved here down the street from us, and now we're singing in the choir together at OLPH, you know, and it's
again
just,
music, right? Like
music.
This thread
but even like when we were going, like right after COVID, when we started going to Kingsburg, you know, it's like we didn't have this conversation of like, hey, we, you know, it's like we just both kind of organically ended up there.
No, and I think it was, I think to your point, it's also a function of those of like mind and soul gravitate towards some very, very similar things, right, in the same season. And especially during COVID, that was one of the few ways of being able to worship where you were like, this is how it's supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be in my living room.
No,
on a TV.
And I don't know about you, but those were very formative years in my faith. And probably Kristen and I have talked about this, like, going the year and a half that we were going to Holy Family in Kingsburg was probably our favorite time in our faith. It just felt so genuine and pure, but also too, I think it also, part of it is like that that was the one time, and I don't mean to offend,
just say it.
I don't mean to offend like Father Michael if he's listening to this, because I think we're getting to that point at OLPH. But Holy Family in Kingsburg was, to me, like the first time in my life where I was like, this is what the Novus Ordo is supposed to look like.
And is supposed to look like.
With sacred music. It was just chant.
Agreed.
But it just felt traditional, but not rad trad.
Yeah.
There wasn't like the elitism. And
well, forget all the, not to, cut you off, but forget all these subtitles. The Mass is holy, right? Like it is holy for this time and in this, present historical moment. This is what the Mass should and will look like moving forward, right? And we've talked about this at length. It comes down to leadership, right? Yeah. Father Greg was a leader, right? Weird, awkward leader, but he was a leader, right? And Father Michael's the same way. It's like you need men, priests that are, they're not harsh, but at the same time, it's like, this is what we're doing. And this is what we're doing, period, right? Like there isn't a, we need to placate to this group and we need to make sure that we have these different services. It's like, no, the Mass is going to look the same, however many services we have for the weekend. And
which is great because Father Michael is doing that.
That's what I'm saying.
Some of the things that specifically stood out to me in Kingsburg was, like I mentioned, the sacred music. I loved the, maybe 2 masses. When he did the Latin Mass, it was cool, don't get me wrong, and I liked it. But my favorite masses were when he would do the Novus Ordo, but he would do it ad orientem. He would do the Liturgy of the Eucharist in Latin. So all the consecration prayers in Latin. And we had the communion rail. Even when we were outside, they brought the kneelers. So most of the people received kneeling and on the tongue at a time when you weren't supposed to during COVID. But I think there's something to be said for, I hate the fact that the church did away with the communion rail. Because that alone, you can go through all kinds of theology and all kinds of, just scholar type talks and things about, but just the piety that comes in just the people that understand that we receive Christ kneeling and on the tongue. And not to go rad trad, but like our hands are not consecrated. No. And not like what my hands are not worthy of holding our Lord. And receiving kneeling and on the tongue to know that there's something special going on. I don't think it's a bad thing that the bishops are trying to move into this like Eucharistic revival type thing. But again, pontificating, me talking about I can fix the church. I think that I don't think that they're exactly hitting the mark, because I think that if you just made a return to the communion rail and people receiving our Lord on the tongue from consecrated hands, not to go rad trad, but that alone, I think just in the subconscious, people would understand that there's something special here. It doesn't. Jesus is Jesus, and he is very much present in that host. But when you're receiving it from Susan from the parish council, and you're receiving it in your hand, and you see people fumbling it.
Susan is a fictitious person, by the way, everyone.
And people go, and I mean, just 2 weeks ago, this guy goes to pull down his mask, and he fumbles and drops the host. And then he's like, I don't know what to do. And the extraordinary minister of Holy Communion, which I hate that term, because extraordinary means
happening
out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
It should be in extraordinary circumstances, meaning out of the ordinary or not normal.
Yeah.
There's nothing extraordinary about it if it happens every week.
Yep.
So I hate that term.
Yeah.
But when most Catholics don't believe in the true presence because there's nothing that really screams true presence at them. There's
Agreed.
nothing sacred.
I would even go so far as to say, I'm not opposed to kneeling. We were doing that at Holy Family.
Yeah.
Even moving to just receiving on the tongue, I would argue, sets a certain tone, right? Now, obviously, germ, canon law, right, rubric, state that there are a variety of ways that you can receive, but there should still, like everything else in the church, there should exist a stratification, right? Whereas this is the preferred way.
Yeah.
These are okay, right?
Acceptable, allowed.
Acceptable,
in
allowed.
a pandemic.
Thank you.
Right? Okay. If and I was never of the mind of, because there were people that were like, if I can't receive on the tongue, I'm not going to receive. And I'm like, well, wait a second.
Yeah.
So you're not going to receive Jesus because you can't receive him the way that you want to receive him.
Yep.
You might as well be Protestant.
Yep.
Or you're like a Pharisee who wants to worship the way that you want to worship.
Yep.
So I never bought into that. I was like, hey, if this is the only way I can receive.
Well, now you're putting yourself in the position of not receiving grace.
Yeah.
Right. You're making the dictation of how grace is, imposed versus allowing, again, in an extreme, extraordinary circumstance, going, okay, I'll work with this system because it's not like outlandish, like going to mass in a living room, which is absolutely outlandish.
Or what some churches were doing, where they would you'd receive the host in a sealed like plastic sleeve.
Which
and
isn't valid,
go
by
out
the way.
to your car and in your car pull it out and consume it. Like, are we not concerned about like abuse and sacrilege?
Well, and that's where I go, right? Is because the on the hands, and it's unintentional, right? Like we could go down the rabbit hole of there's nefarious people out there trying to desecrate Jesus. Fine, that exists. I'm not denying that doesn't exist, but what percent? Right? Yeah. The higher percent is to exactly what you said. People that are uncatechized, that are ignorant, that don't know any better, or that aren't around people that are going, hey, you're with us, but you can't receive.
Yeah.
Like, because you're not a practicing Catholic, we love having you with us. We want you to receive. We can explain how you can, come into the church in order to receive. But because we believe this is, there isn't that talk. So those people are coming up either with family members or friends, or you have people that are coming because, thanks be to God, they're feeling lonely or they need solace, and the church is where they tend to find it, which is shocker. This freaking tractor beam of grace is there. No wonder they're attracted to it. But again, ignorance and non-catechized in terms of understanding the magnitude and order with which what separates us apart from every other Christian denomination, right? Which is that we believe in the true presence. It's not consubstantiation, it's transubstantiation, which means it really is Jesus.
It's turned into the body.
It is body, blood, soul, and divinity. Yeah. So there is a proper way to receive both, more importantly, where our souls are disposed, and then secondarily, physically how we receive.
And I think where I kind of split with the rad trads a little bit, like when it comes to reception of communion, is that their bigger concern with like not receiving on the tongue is that it opens the door for Eucharistic abuse or sacrilege to happen, or people to steal the host. I think that's all. When I hear a lot of their arguments, that's a lot of what it comes down to. Sure, that is a concern, but for me, that's not the main concern. My bigger thing is just like if people received on the tongue, kneeling, it's a reverent thing that, again, goes to show that there's something bigger happening there. There's something special happening
your
there.
Posture, you're putting yourself in a posture that now you either believe that that's Jesus and that is God, or you better be questioning whether you believe that is Jesus or God. Right.
And like not to say that the other part of it isn't a concern, because it is. It's just not at the forefront. But I'll tell a quick story. I remember growing up, my dad hadn't been to confession in years, and he would start coming to mass. This was after his stroke, but he wouldn't receive. He'd come up and cross his arms for the blessing. One Sunday, for whatever reason, he forgot to cross his arms, and the priest goes to give him the communion, and he panicked. He didn't know what to do, and he didn't want to be embarrassed, so he put out his hands and received it.
Gotcha.
But he knew well enough to not consume it because he wasn't supposed to. He wasn't in the state of grace.
Okay.
Bless my dad.
Yeah.
God rest his soul. He did the only thing that he thought he should do in that moment, and he stuck it in his shirt pocket.
That's one way to do it.
Well, and I remember we got home.
FYI, not the right way to do it.
Yeah, don't. Please don't do that. Just, don't either cross your arms or just stay in your pew and pray.
Or guess what? Keep Jesus in your hands and go to one of your family members.
Consume this.
Well,
he didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And he was scared of my mom. So he didn't. We got home and he told my mom. She was pissed.
Yeah.
I remember we went to our
Good for
room
her.
and I could hear her just chewing
Letting him have it.
She let him have it.
Yeah.
But again, would that abuse ever had happened if communion on the hand was not allowed?
Agreed. But that's what I'm saying. What's fascinating is that he was catechized, and yet it was like a deer in the headlights. Like, oh shit,
Yeah,
what do I do with this?
But again, extraordinary circumstances,
Yeah.
and going back to like quote unquote extraordinary ministries for the communion, the church allowed those for extraordinary circumstances, like a shortage of priests.
Yep.
Situations where the priest wasn't around, but it was never meant to be like, hey, this is just what we do every Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and that, like, I think I actually, I'll differ with you in terms of, I think my hope, right? I'm the eternal optimist here.
I think you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My hope is that this, the Eucharistic revival leads into more focused attention to those types of things. Mm-hmm. I think the way to go about what you're talking about is to bring back, right? Like, and we're doing it, right? Like Father Michael's doing it at OLPH, and hopefully other pastors are, in terms of looking at and making sure from a catechesis standpoint, our faithful are being consistently exposed to what the church truly believes about the Eucharist. And then by way of that, now we move into, as much as this, do I dance around this politely? It does lead into what we're talking about, right? Because it has to start at the focal point, which is Jesus truly present, body, blood, soul, and divinity.
Right.
Then we get into, okay, if he is truly present, body, blood, soul, and divinity.
What is our response?
What is our disposition?
Yeah.
How are we, right? Like, and it's not even in the reception of him. It's also in how we carry ourselves from the beginning. Not even the beginning, but prior to entering the church,
right, to
post-recession, not even end of Mass, but post-recession, are we actually giving thanks to God?
Yeah.
Right? Like, because I'm guilty of it. I know we're all guilty of this as Catholics. It's like, as soon as Father leaves the building and we're heading out that door, God forbid we're doing the Judas shuffle, right? Like, we should be at some level giving at least a couple minutes of thanksgiving, of realizing I've just received the maker of the universe. Yeah. He is now present in me at a pivotal moment, if not like throughout the week, right?
Yeah.
But if absolutely we should be on Sundays because of obligation. Now it's a function of making sure that we're present there. So.
Well, and I think that's where we as men are called to lead our families in that. Like, I started with my family during the COVID times when we were going to Holy Family. We started after Mass, we kneel as a family, and we do the Leonine prayers.
Yep. We
don't do them traditionally the way that they were done. Like, we skip the main Leonine prayer that was done by, Pope Leo, was it the 13th, I think. And it was for, praying
I don't think I'm familiar with this.
It was to pray against, a lot of the heresies and things that were coming into the church at that time.
Okay.
But we kneeled down as a family and we prayed 3 Hail Marys,
yep.
the Hail Holy Queen, Saint Michael the Archangel, and then Most Sacred Heart of Jesus, have mercy on us 3 times.
Nice.
And that's where I think as men we're called to bring our family in, and hey, we're going to kneel after Mass and be this example, and not for the sake of being the example, but like you said, like kneel
to your domestic church. You're going to establish that this is the discipline that we will follow, not because we're trying to tell other people that this is what we do, but because it's good for us.
But I do it loud and audibly. I lead my family, and I'll tell you what, I've noticed people around us that kneel down and pray. I've heard them praying with us.
Oh, interesting.
You know,
awesome.
So it's awesome that we're going to start doing the St. Michael prayer at OLPH,
which
after
again
Mass.
was time in memoriam practice,
right? Well, for low Mass, but still, you know, and nothing drives me crazier than we've mentioned the applause after the last song, and we've also mentioned like people just start talking. People just start, oh, hey, what are you guys doing for lunch today? Or oh, how was the thing yesterday? And it's like, we're still in the temple. We're in the church. We just received Christ. He's still present in our bodies. You know, and we're going to start talking about all these other things. You know, it's just, it drives me nuts. You know, and that's why even like, I just think it for me it goes back to like it's almost in the same vein as like lex orandi, lex credendi. How you pray is how you believe. You know, and I think that, like I said, what the bishops are doing is good, and I think Father Michael's doing a great job of it. Sometimes the faithful needs a little bit of a nudge in like, hey, we're going to start doing it this way. You know, because we can hear all the talks and all the different things about the true presence and all these things, but our body language and our posture also helps us believe what we're doing. And like I said, if more people saw it and received that way, they would understand that there's something bigger, there's something deeper going on here. And even just a lot of the language that is used. Like I've for a long time had a problem with the announcements done before Mass, which they should be. But then they're like, okay, you know, let us join and begin the celebration of the Mass. And I've always kind of thought, like, I don't like that terminology, like the celebration of the Mass. Like, it sounds very boomer, post-Vatican II.
You and this boomer thing.
I don't like it. And so like it's funny because I was asked.
You're such an ageist, right?
Well, I was asked. Jerry had me do the announcements before Mass.
I know. I noticed. You like paused and then you're like the holy sacrifice of the Mass.
And then so I said, because it said on the paper the celebration of the Mass, and I'm like, no, that's kind of gay. I'm sorry. I don't like it said that way. Because it reminds me of all these like, let us build this city of God. It's just I don't. So So I
think that's you projecting, by the way.
It might be. That's fine. But that's why I said as we begin to celebrate the holy sacrifice of the Mass.
You still use celebrate. Though.
I still use celebrate because it's not celebration.
You're already assimilating all the boomer
but
stuff.
But it's not celebrate or celebration in like that sense. Like we think about celebration. Celebrate good times. But it's more of we honor it. Okay. But to add and celebrate the holy sacrifice of the Mass. When do we ever hear that? We don't hear that anymore. We don't hear the Mass referred to as the holy sacrifice of the Mass.
I think the celebration focuses on the resurrection that's occurring in the Mass, right?
We still say it during Lent.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But that's the issue though, is that you're dealing in the Mass, right? It's the crucifixion, death, burial, and resurrection of Christ all in one. So yes, we celebrate all those things, but it should be my dad puts this perfectly. It should be a sober celebration.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think
and a lot of people kind of go, but that's not a celebration. And it's like, no, it is.
Yeah.
But it's how a lot of people talk about how you can experience, whether it's, in deep, deep grief or in really, really, big moments of joy, how you can feel both grief and joy at the same time, right? Those extremes, often you're feeling, yeah. And I can speak to that personally, like it's you have, and I shouldn't say just me, but it's like we've all experienced it to what degree, whatever, right? But it's like that's really the Mass should be seen as, it is a celebration, and I will actually argue that, but it's not celebrate good times.
Well, I think we're on the same page with that, though,
that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we're disagreeing.
Yeah, it's different.
It is different.
But to me, it's terminology.
It's terminology, but it's also understanding what's going on theologically.
Yeah.
Right.
But do most Catholics understand?
No, but that's the thing. It's a think of a boat that's think of a huge freaking aircraft carrier. That's the church, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to take a ton of time for the boat to really move and get to a true north, so to speak, in terms of stuff like that. Because think about it, the catechesis that has not been happening at the pulpit for a long time, or has been lacking, and this isn't disparaging. This is the truth. This is the reality. That's really where Catholics aren't getting that catechesis, or they're not investing in themselves, sadly, right? Like, I won't even point at the clergy. I'll point at, like, the reality is that for too long, for call it 30 years, 40 years, the exception has been, like, the backgrounds that we've come from, which is, no, we take our faith seriously, and we invest ourselves in understanding it.
Well, I think that, you hit the nail on the head. It almost goes back to me. It's very similar to what we mentioned about earlier, like women not requiring men to be men anymore. Yeah. Almost in the same sense, like, it does fall back on us at the laity, because we haven't required that of our priests.
Yeah.
We've been wishy-washy and allowed, like, this just watered down faith, and we've allowed of that from a lot of our priests as well. And a lot of our priests came up under that same kind of wishy-washy faith. So they don't, how can you give what you don't have?
What they don't understand, right? Like, it's the classic, you're only as good as what you perceive or have been presented as good.
Yeah.
Right? Until you've collided with something that is actually, like, really good.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you're like, what have I been doing?
Yeah. So thank God for priests like Father Michael.
Yeah.
And
Father Jacob.
Yeah. I know you haven't heard him much, but I mean, even Father Greg,
Yeah.
I love the fact that, Father Michael is very catechetical in his homilies.
Absolutely.
And his focus is a lot about the Eucharist and confession, and
sacraments.
Sacraments.
Yeah.
We don't hear that kind of stuff much, from a lot of our priests.
No. It's the, I heard this awesome comment recently. It very much approaches the bring your coffee into church type of, right? Like, it's a, we want you to feel included, and, like, part of this. And it's like, okay, like, that's okay every once in a while. But really, like, you should be walking out going, man, I'm a piece of crap.
Sometimes you need to be convicted. Sometimes you do.
Like, and not all the time. There's a time and place for that.
Yeah.
It's more of a function of that's on the pastor to know, okay, I'm going to use this gospel to kind of pull out the freaking baseball bat and, and then, I'm going to use this one to kind of, come here, you're loved.
Yeah.
You're very loved, you know.
Yeah. Not either or, but both and.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
We'll take a break real quick.
All right. So, back from the break. Got some beers popped. Went on a little bit of a...
some Russian River.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ukraine.
Some hop growers.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful citrusy.
Dank.
Dude, I don't know if I can use that one now that I've heard it a number of times. I think it's a little much.
Yeah. Do you associate that more with, like, cannabis type?
I just have never heard of it. I think I'm associating it with, like, stank.
No, dank is it's a term used often with, like, hops.
Okay.
Hoppy beers.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard it multiple times, not just with my buddy who brewed, but other beers too. I've dank whatever, dankful or Anyway.
Anyways. All right, so we went on a cool little rabbit hole there.
Tangent.
Yeah.
Where we solved the church's problems.
where we pontificated to ourselves.
Can you get this podcast into the hands of Pope Francis?
I'm good. I'm good with that staying right here. I don't. All right. So we talked. It was pretty cool hearing you meeting Kristen.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of how that. At least the initial, 40 days rosary, going to adoration, and then let's start there. Let's kick back in from there and kind of hear a little, like couple stories prior to and then maybe post when you guys got engaged. Yeah?
Yeah. Well, oh, man. I hope she's cool with me telling these stories, but I think she will be. She's pretty laid back. I can probably count on one hand, if even that, the amount of times we've fought in our marriage. One of the guy who does our sound for the Holy Cross Ministries, he's one of my favorite people. His name's Victor. Him and his wife been married for probably 30 years, but he's like, we don't fight. We've never fought, and I'm like, that's cool. My wife and I don't either, but that's very rare, Yeah, she's very laid back.
I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing.
Not fighting. Well, I mean, not like not a true fight. Not about anything legit. Yeah. So after that, kind of 40-day novena, it was kind of that wasn't like the "will you be my girlfriend" talk. It was just kind of like a, hey, I'm interested. Like, I like you. I want to pursue this. And she kind of felt the same way. Not long after that, she cut things off.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was pretty devastated, because I thought things were going pretty good. But like I said, she just wasn't really used to what, the kind of guy I was, that I was actually not trying to take advantage of her, and I just think she didn't really know how to handle that, and she kind of called things off and just said, I just need some time to focus on myself and be single, and which I was like, well, okay. I mean, on the inside, I was like, you've done that,
Yeah.
But on the outside, just, okay, well, that's... And I went home and I was devastated, and we didn't talk for a while. And then we kind of, sometime later, kind of started talking again. She started coming around, and we'd kind of hang out and talk again.
Organically?
Yeah, it just kind of happened again where we, hang out a couple times here and there, and... I remember one time she was going to the movies with a guy friend, and I was pretty jealous, but I just we weren't anything, so there's nothing I could say. But yeah, we eventually, little by little, kind of started hanging out, talking again, and just when things started feeling like they were kind of going again, she called things off again.
Really?
Yeah.
Twice?
Yeah.
Okay.
This was a few months later, and she just kind of...
So were you guys actually dating at this point?
No, we were just kind of just talking.
Yeah.
We weren't really anything, but she kind of freaked out and panicked again. Mm-hmm. And the first time I was like, okay,
yep,
I'll let you have your space, but I was devastated on the inside. Mm-hmm. And the second time she did it to me, I just got mad.
Yeah.
I didn't even allow myself to fall in a state of desperation. I kind of let her have it, mm-hmm. where I was just kind of like, you know what? Not in a cocky way, but I was like, I'm actually trying to be a good thing for you, you know, and I'm different than what you're used to. And I'm not going to be around forever. Basically, the offer is not going to stand forever.
Yeah.
Basically, if you walk out on this right now, I'm done, because I know what I want.
Yeah.
I want a good girl to get married. I don't care that you're not Catholic. You're on your way. Yeah. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But I don't care about your past, but I want a girl who I know that I can marry, settle down, have kids. I always wanted to get married young. I always wanted to have kids young. Mm-hmm. My dad had a stroke when I was 12 years old, and I was never able to like, you know, have those memories with my dad of like playing catch and doing fun things, you know. And I always knew that I wanted from a young age to have kids. And I didn't tell her that then. I didn't want to freak her out.
Sure.
But, you know, I basically said, look, if you walk out on this, like, I'm done. I'm going to start looking elsewhere. You know, and she left there in tears, crying. And I was like, it's your call. Like, and she left. And I was so, like, hardened in my heart that I just was like, whatever. Like, her loss. And I remember going home that night, and I was done with it. I mean, yeah, I really liked her, but I was like, you know, if she doesn't want it, that's fine. Like, I'm still young, I'll move on. And I wake up the next morning to a text from her, just apologizing. Just, hey, I'm, you know what? Like, I went home, I was crying. Like, I talked to Anna, and I'm being dumb. You know, like, I'm not ready for a relationship, but I think I'm ready to just let this be something, you know, like, you know, can we meet tonight? And it's funny because I remember I read that text and I just started laughing. It was almost a cocky laugh, you know, where I was, you know, I was just kind of like, you know, all right, you know, but yeah, and then
the hubris.
it kind of was a little bit. I mean, I won't lie, you know, but it was funny because I was in a such different place that second time than the first time. You know, we kind of got together that night and just talked, and she was like, you know, like, I'm not ready for a relationship, but, you know.
So she still wasn't ready for a relationship, but she was saying,
but like, we can.
I messed up.
Yeah. Like, I'm okay with this, like, with us hanging out with the understanding that this is going to lead somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm like, cool, that's all I want.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to rush you into anything that you don't want.
Yeah.
You know, like, so, yeah. So, and that was like in October.
Okay.
And so we kind of just were still friends. I mean, I'd like to think that I courted her in the traditional way.
So it was. So let's create a timeline here. So you had the conversation with her, 40th day. She joined you, Adoration Rosary.
That was in like maybe June or July. Okay.
Then she broke
things off.
Cut things off
in August, like a week before her birthday.
Okay. So only like a month or two after. Yeah. And then October
was kind of when.
So it was like 60 days-ish between each.
Probably, yeah.
Ish.
And so then, you know, we still like, so now it was cool because we were still just friends and hanging out, but we very much were interested in each other. Yeah. You know.
Had you guys kissed at all at this point?
No.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I didn't kiss her before we were like official.
Nice.
It was Christmas Eve of what would that have been? 2007.
Okay. Good on you, bro.
Yeah, when she really liked Randy Travis. Okay. And so I learned Forever and Ever, Amen. Okay. And Christmas Eve, I went over to their apartment. Nice. And I took my guitar and I played that song for her. And then, that night, I just, point blank, just, you know.
Will you be my girlfriend?
Yeah. And she said yes. And then that's just kind of where it went. We took things very slow. Yeah, I don't think I kissed her for probably a month. I don't think I held her hand until like 3 weeks after that. And he, you know, didn't kiss for over a month after that. I mean, taking things very slow, which, I mean, kids nowadays probably would not understand that, you know? But, you know, it was just one of those things where, hey, we're going to do this the right way. Yeah. And we're going to take things slow. And you're not someone I want to take advantage of. Sure. You know, you're somebody that I want to fall in love with and want to marry.
It's the nonverbal version of, you know, hey, I'm in this for the long haul.
Exactly.
You know, the short term isn't my desire right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then, you know, the next November, so we dated for 11 months. Okay. I took her to, well, and I'll backtrack a little bit because I bought the ring, and then I individually asked, because her parents were divorced by that point, individually asked both of her parents for her hand in marriage.
Okay.
Like a week or two before I actually proposed.
Nice.
And I was gonna propose. My plan, I remember our first official date was December 6th. And we went to Luna's here in Clovis.
Okay.
And my plan was, okay, on the anniversary of our first date, I'm going to take her to Luna's and I'm going to propose.
Yeah.
And I didn't make it that far because I bought the ring and I was like, I can't wait.
Yeah.
I remember her and I were going to go to Adoration. I bought the ring and I think I had it for like a week.
Okay.
And that next Saturday, we were going to go to Adoration and then just go out to dinner. And I remember I left my house and I drove like 2-3 miles from my house, about to get on the 168. And I just turned the truck around. I was like, you know what? I got to go back and get the ring. Like, I can't wait anymore.
Nice.
This has to happen tonight.
Yeah.
And actually, I had talked to her dad before that, but I hadn't talked to her mom yet. She was living with her mom in an apartment. And I went and picked her up. And we get in my truck. And I said, hey, I got to go in and use the restroom. I'll be right back. She goes, okay, that's fine. So I go back in. Her mom's in there. And I didn't have to use the restroom. I go in there and you know, I tell her mom, hey, like, you know, I want to propose to your daughter. Like, I show her the ring and I'm like, I want to do it tonight. Like, do I have your blessing? And she starts crying. She's like, absolutely. You know? And so this
was, you guys dated for a year.
11 months.
11 months.
This was 11 months.
So this was 11 months past when you had asked her to be your girlfriend.
Yeah, and I think it was November 27th, if I remember correctly. So we go to Adoration, and then right after that, I take her just around the corner, and I sit her on the curb, and I just start telling her how much everything's meant to me and all that, and I get down on one knee and pop the question, and I always tease her for this because she doesn't remember it like this, but I remember I got down on one knee and I opened the box and said, will you marry me? Yeah. And she didn't answer right away. She had a big old smile on her face, but she looks down to look at the ring. And then she says yes. And I always make fun of her because I'm like, yeah, you had to check the ring first and make sure, like, before you could say yeah. She's like, no, I got caught up in the moment, whatever. But yeah, so I always give her crap for that. Yeah. But it's kind of funny because that ring was a cheap, like $500 ring from Sears that I had my dad help me get on his credit card, and then I just paid him back. Nice. But I'd always wanted to get her like a legit ring that she... Not that the $500 one isn't legit, but yeah, I know what you mean. And she didn't care. She would have never even cared. Yeah. But it'll be, I think, 2 years this Christmas. For her Christmas present, I got her like an expensive ring. And I blindfolded her, and I took her to where I proposed. Nice. Yeah. And that's cool. But I drove around a little bit so she throw her off. Yeah. Take her there, and I sit her down. Do you know where we are? And she's like, I'm not really sure. And so I had her take off the blindfold, and I'm on one knee with the ring. So the old hopeless romantic in me still lives. I like to think I still got it. But
that's awesome, bro.
Yeah. So we were engaged. I mean, that was November. We got engaged, and we got married July 18th the next year. So, and then a couple months later, we're pregnant. So, which is the way it's supposed to be. That's about
what our track record was as well. So
yeah, very quick. But we didn't move in. We didn't live together before we got married. Yeah. Things the old school, the right way, and I like to think that's why we're still together because there was not this whole
85% or whatever is the number. I think it's even higher than that now, 90 something for for people that live together, end up getting divorced. I
love the old Mark Hart talks when he talks about from Life Team. Like all these people are like, oh, I want to find out if we're compatible. It's like, you're a guy, she's a girl. You're not compatible. You're not. You leave the toilet seat up and she leaves all her makeup and shit all over the place. Like, you're not compatible. You're not. But you make it work.
Yeah, exactly.
You make it work.
I don't think I ever heard him, or if I did, I don't remember it. But no, it's not even that you're not compatible. It's that, like, the whole point is that, again, like back to a super early part of the conversation, it's a decision.
Yeah.
Like it's not something that like you go into going, well, I want to kind of peek behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
I want to pop the hood, kind of see what's under there before I, really, really fully sign that deal.
Right.
And it's like, nah, man, like,
Yeah.
like that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
It's a thick and thin, no matter what, like you're hitched, and it's not a like.
It's the only time I agree with Nancy Pelosi when she was talking about that bill. If it's like a stool sample, we got to pass it to know what's in it. You just got to get married to know what you're getting into.
Not ever. That's an insane thing coming from an octogenarian.
Oh, yeah, she was something else. She's just a good old alcoholic at her. I can't stand her, but Father Jacob loves her. He always says, better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
I actually very much agree with that.
But he does say that he says he would deny her communion, but not for the reason most priests would. He says he would deny her communion because you can only give communion to the living.
Wow.
Sorry, I'm exposing you, Father. Oh, let's move on.
Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing. That was cool. All right. So, we've talked about music. That I would, classify that as like hobby, but I think probably not more than just a hobby, for both you and I.
Mm-hmm.
What other like hobbies or interests are you into?
They change a lot. But like a few years ago, I got really into woodworking.
Cool.
And my buddy and I were building cornhole boards and selling them, and that was fun. But just kind of got into just doing stuff. It's like when I bought a house, all of a sudden the desire to like work with my hands and build stuff just kind of, it's like I
crept up on you.
Yeah, I'm like, it's like I bought a house that had a garage with a workbench, and my father-in-law that Christmas gave me a chop saw, and that was just kind of like. And then my dad had passed like a couple years before that, and I inherited a bunch of his tools, and so it was just kind of one of those things of like, you know what, I just want to build stuff. Like I built a doghouse. Like I renovated my mom's kitchen, just doing stuff with my hands, So I love doing like woodwork and that kind of stuff. I'm by no means an expert, and you're better at it than I am. But I'd love to.
I would be careful about that statement. It looks better.
Yeah, well, I mean, looking at that
sometimes
that table over there, I couldn't have built that. But I could. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say that because we can all do stuff just with the know-how and the knowledge. I think you've been blessed with.
Well, YouTube.
YouTube, but also your dad has a lot of knowledge with that kind of stuff, and we'll obviously he's hear from him on this podcast too. But so just I've loved doing woodwork. I recently got into making rosaries. I was doing it a few years ago, and then I kind of stopped, and then I kind of recently got back into it, where it was after a retreat where I just kind of had I don't know how God speaks to a lot of people. Some people might actually audibly hear God speak to them. I don't know if they do or don't. I never have, but I feel like God puts things on your heart. And sometimes I have a thought that I just can't get out of my mind for weeks, and I'm like, you know what, I'm being called to this. And after that retreat, I just kept thinking like I need to start making rosaries, not necessarily to make money out of it, and I haven't sold any yet, but more of just like, what can I do to help people pray, to call. And specifically, you and I have talked about this, but just trying to build a ministry towards men, and helping men be men. So I've kind of gotten back into that. I recently bought recording equipment to start trying to record music, which that's kind of taken a little bit of a pause because of other stuff going on in my life. But I do need to get back into that. But, just different hobbies and things. I mean, nothing. They kind of shift a lot, you know.
Yeah. That's why it's a hobby, right? Like it's like just interested, like kind of a deep dive, pull you away from
in your free time or your spare time.
Yeah.
Things you enjoy doing.
Yeah. Something to take you away from just being idle. Right?
Yeah.
Like idle hands or the devil's work, devil's playground, whatever that,
And then I don't know if you'd call it a hobby, but I think just even what we're doing right now, like this is being recorded, but how many times have we sat around with buddies and done what we're doing now, have a cigar and some whiskey and just have conversation, even that is necessary for men just to kind of.
Well, I mean, especially with, we don't need to dive into what's going on currently until you're ready to share, but like what's going on currently in your life, it's like, this is when you need that more than ever, right? Yeah. Like kind of the sports analogy of falling back to the fundamentals of I need to connect with people. It's important to be engaged with absolutely with family members and taking care of them, but then also realizing that you have a life to live. Yeah. And you do need to, you can't be completely like everything else in life, not just this situation. You can't be consumed by it 100%. You need to be able to unplug and go, I need to laugh. Yeah. I need to, engage in activities that I enjoy to do in my, off time and live, right. Like it's everything. It's the both and to what you said earlier. It's not we shouldn't be so focused on one thing that we can't do both, or all the things. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's cool. What's on the horizon for you? What do you, what do you, in life in general, not necessarily work, not necessarily family, not, but just what are you looking towards? What are you wanting to, where do you feel God is calling you? Whatever, you take the question to be, run with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of like the old kind of quote of like, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, Yeah. Because it's, it's like I get these crazy thoughts and ideas in my head sometimes of things I want to do, and then life happens, Yeah. And that's kind of where I am right now, where life has happened in different areas. But one of the things that I really want to do and am working on is recording a hymns album. Mm-hmm. That's something that I really feel called to do. Just in our music ministry, I feel like a lot of people constantly ask for, hey, do you guys have a CD? Which I have a CD that I recorded a few years ago of some songs that I wrote, but nothing crazy. I'm not super proud of it. Not the material itself, but more like the quality
of the recording. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but also too, I mean, I in the future definitely want to record stuff that I've written, because I've written not only faith-based songs, but also I love country music. Yep. I absolutely love country music. And I've written a good amount of stuff, that I would love to record, eventually. And I think there's a place for that. But right now I really feel called to record hymns. And I think because a lot of people, when we do retreats and stuff, ask for a CD, and that's something that, I can't, I could record a lot of the stuff that we do at retreats and conferences and stuff, but a lot of that stuff's copyrighted. Mm-hmm. And I'm not interested in jumping through all the legal loopholes of how you do all that and paying the fees. And so I'm like, well, I can look into recording hymns that are public domain and can't get sued by dead people. So, so that's kind of something that's on the horizon for me. I got a long way to go on it because I'm still kind of trying to figure out what it's going to look like. The goal that I've set for myself to have it done is by next summer. Okay. And I hope that can happen.
How many songs?
I brainstormed how many hymns that I can realistically try to learn and do, and it's close to 18.
Okay.
It's a lot.
Nice.
And I've only recorded one so far, and I don't even think I'm done with it because I kind of want to add, more instruments to it. Because right now it's just
how many parts?
Right now it's just guitar and vocals.
Okay.
But I would like to look into adding percussion and bass, potentially even some harmony. We'll see. The more crazy I want to get with it, the longer it's going to take.
Yep.
But next June, I believe it is, Father Jacob's doing another men's retreat out in Texas and wants me to come out there and do music for it. So that's kind of like the goal that I've set for myself. I want to have it done by then, so that it could be something that I could have available there and, sell. Not with the intention to make money, but just, hey, like, sure, make money to, kind of put, back the money that I've put into this project. And if I make more on top of it, that's great. Kind of like with the rosary thing, but it's more of just like helping people to pray.
Yeah.
If someone wants music like that and they want a CD because they want to pray, then that's great.
Then why not? Yeah.
Yeah, and this is, I say this as humbly as I possibly can because it can sound very arrogant. But we've just had so many people over the years that just come up and just say, like you guys, your music touched me. One guy that said, I haven't truly felt saved until tonight, like hearing the worship, which, there's different thoughts about that, but I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that, but, but that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah. But all glory to God. To God be all the glory.
I don't think that's arrogant, Rick. I don't think that's, that's what the gift is meant for. I think to your point, it's a function of you're responding to enough feedback and input to where it's like, I need to do something more, now fleshing out what that looks like. And to your point, maybe it falls flat on its face, you know what I'm saying? But guess
fine.
what? You did it. That's to me, that's anything that I've endeavored to do. It's always, I'd much rather look in the rearview mirror and go, I don't have any regrets because I freaking did it. I pulled the trigger and I executed, and maybe it fell flat on its face, but so what? I did a bang up job of at least giving it my college try, you know? So. Yeah,
no. And so, that's some of the stuff. And also, I have felt this like call in the last 6 months really to, just help people pray.
Yep.
And really, I think a lot of it stems from the fact that, like, for me personally, I haven't always felt like I have the best prayer life.
Yep.
And so for me, I'm like, well, I need to do something that's going to challenge me to pray. And I think this is where we can kind of segue, if you're comfortable talking about first fruits, but because I really feel I felt validated in that thought of mine when you and I had that conversation about a month ago about first fruits, and it's just really like my heart is really at like helping people to pray, but more specifically like building brotherhood of obviously we talked earlier in this podcast about like men being men, calling men to be men again, and how we can hold each other accountable as men and challenge each other. And so, when you kind of brought up first fruits to me as the idea, I thought, man, this is pretty awesome. This is kind of what's in my heart, and I love the idea behind it. And maybe you can talk a little bit about what first fruits is and kind of your vision behind it, or at least tell the story about how it came about.
It's we've talked about it, at length. It's probably been a number of months, maybe even a year, of kind of kicking around something to your point. Like I've never, and I actually I'll go as far as to say, like, I really actually have an aversion to people when they say, yeah, I hear God's voice, like I'm kind of like, like there's a danger in that, in my opinion, like Satan's voice can sound just like God's, and so, and I don't want to cast, aspersions on people that actually have legitimate private locutions from God, but that's a very special gift. And I think when you look at the history of our church and saints, it's a very, very specific, small group of people that actually have that. So I'll leave that right there.
Okay.
First fruits, kind of piggybacking off of what you've already said. I actually, like, my personal experience has been, I've gone through very similar. I think most men, we struggle with, what like our daily prayer life should look like, right?
Yeah. And
especially
if I can interject for a quick second, sorry. But I noticed you. I've noticed you posting first fruits for. I mean, it's probably been the better part of a year now.
Yeah.
And it was a lot. I mean, what it's been has always been a screenshot of like the rosary every morning.
Yeah.
In your car, which to me looked like on the way to jiu-jitsu, or just in your morning routine, and constantly posting first fruits. And I never asked you about it. I was just kind of like, because you always tag Jamie, so I figured, well, this is something you and Jamie kind of have going on, But I've noticed you doing that for a while now. Mm-hmm. So just for the listener to know, kind of like the origins of it, it was just like a prayer with the word first, the words first fruits. Yeah. So then, when you explained it to me, I was like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. So I, kind of backtracking to, I'm all about origins and the story, right? So, cause that's ultimately why this podcast started as well, right? Like kind of a storytelling connecting people that otherwise wouldn't be connected by the ups and downs, the reality of the Christian life, right? The reality of the Catholic life, which is that often Satan is trying to separate us. So that's it in a nutshell, and this is meant to bring people together to understand, hey, we're all experiencing the same stuff, and we need to know that we're not alone in that, right? So first fruits came from this prayer life. To your point about prayer life, I actually reached a point in my own personal prayer life where the rosary really wasn't, quote unquote, doing it for me, right? And so I was trying to figure out ways to, what else can I do? I went through a pretty long period of time of spending 20 to 30 minutes in just silent meditation, maybe read a verse of scripture and then, meditate on it, right? Just really had this aversion to it. And then I kind of had this, to your point, probably a good year ago, just had this moment of, you're being a freaking pansy and you got to stop. Like you need to commit, just like we've talked about with marriage. It's like, just because you don't feel like doing it or just because you don't feel anything from it doesn't mean that there aren't fruits from it. Yeah. Right. And so, I basically just said, I'm going to commit to this and it's going to be the first thing that I do. Right. It's going to be, as best I can. Right. And I think I've been called out on this, and I think it's important in terms of, and you've been good about this too, is it's like, we all have different walks of life. We all have different jobs. And so to say that like my schedule can be mirrored to a number of people is just that's not realistic. Right. Yeah. And so I guess like kind of reframing it is well, whatever the first thing is, back to your point of when we first wake up, are we looking at our emails? Are we looking at social media, or are we praying? Right. Really, it comes to what's the first thing we do. Yeah. Right. And that first thing that we do really sets the trajectory of the rest of our day. And to me, setting this bullet, right? Like setting this real hard line in the sand of the first thing I'm going to do is to ask and seek for guidance and to understand God more deeply. And so, for me, like the rosary makes sense in terms of a lot of things, right? It's one of the oldest prayers of the church. It's scriptural, right? There's a lot of miracles associated with the rosary. I could go ad nauseum into it. And then as you and I started talking, it became this like, there's still kind of this aversion for men of truly seeking to pray a rosary consistently.
Yeah.
And I think it's nothing other than it's you're talking to a woman. You're talking to our Mother Mary.
Right.
And that can often be perceived as something that's not manly, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that that's who Jesus was going to first, right? That's who really, like, when we look at Jesus and his ministry of 3 years, the 30 years prior to him going into ministry was him leaning on Mary because Joseph wasn't in the picture.
Yeah.
And so, First Fruits is really kind of just taken on this. It's a call to action for men, and not just men. It's for women too. But like, because I'm a man, and we've talked about this, like, it resonates more to like just share it from a manly perspective,
Right.
And then out of that, it came, the podcast, kind of in tandem. I think it was, they were both kind of evolving. I think the podcast idea came sooner than that.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. But then it, like, for me, it was also a function of, we've talked, like, I wanted a side hustle. So what did that look like? And so I don't know. I don't want to say that I'm totally fleshed out on everything, but I know that, that it has already impacted many people, just like personal messages that people have sent me.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's validating. Now, does that mean that, that's solidifying anything? No. But at the same time, if it's drawing people closer to God and the church, then that's all I ask. And then the obviously the business, like the shirts and like what that's going to turn into.
Yeah.
Because there's a website. If you go to the Ignem.com website, there's hat and a couple t-shirts at this point.
Which are conversation starters,
That's what I'm saying. Like it's,
it has. I don't know if yours came in yet, but my shirt hasn't come in yet. But
it's on the way.
Can't wait to start wearing it because
Manny's is on the way. Mine should be here like next week. I think yours is end of next week or early the following. So,
but I mean, it's just people are going to be like, hey, what is that?
Yeah.
What is that? And that's kind of been my hope with it. Like, in posting a lot of it, it's like, just for the listener, like, if you guys haven't seen it yet, which if you guys follow us on Instagram, you have, but every day for you it's morning, which I love, and I need to get to that point, but with my schedule it doesn't always work that way. But whenever it's just a daily rosary, and what we're doing is we're just posting a screenshot of, because we're usually using an aid to pray it, either Relevant Radio app or I've been using the Hallow app a lot, and it's just posting a screenshot of your rosary with the hashtag First Fruits. And it's not a like braggy, like, hey, look at me, I prayed.
No,
because it could look that way from the outside looking in. But it's meant to be more of a challenge of, like, from man to man. Hey, what
have you done today?
I did my rosary today. Yeah. Did you do yours? And just calling each other out in love. And that's kind of like, that's what I love about it. It's just that kind of accountability factor. But I would love if you just spoke for a second to how the name First Fruits, because you mentioned like the Jewish origins.
Yeah. So Leviticus, the First Fruits is a holiday in Jewish tradition, or not a holiday, but it's a tradition, right? So the concept is that every I believe it's every 7 years. And for those that are biblically much more knowledgeable than I, if I'm way off, then totally fine to renege on this and change it, down the line. But essentially, it's
at me, bro.
Yeah. It's I'm fine with that. Leviticus, obviously, that's all of Jewish law. Leviticus is all about, like, this is what a proper Jew, an Orthodox Jew must do, like at any point in a given time. And essentially, First Fruits is, in Old Testament terminology, it's referring to that any practicing Jew, any Orthodox Jew, would give a certain % of whatever their first fruits are to the temple.
Like and the harvest?
Correct. The harvest. Or the first lamb that was born. Or the first calf that was born. Or the first however many calves, or right, like and so we talked about the Eucharist and our orientation, right? Like, where's our heart? Where's our body? Like, our posture? It's the same concept. If we're giving the first thing and the best thing, typically the first thing that's coming out of whatever you're producing, in an agrarian culture, is typically the best thing. Because by the end of it, meaning like your cabbage, your sheep, your wheat, whatever, pomegranates, figs, that's going to be not the greatest, right? Typically what's coming out first is your strongest, best product. So there's an intentionality behind that, right? Like, God knew when he was giving Moses, these Levitical laws, you're creating a culture around, are we oriented toward God? And how is that, right? Now, I've started to learn a little bit more because it's a little hard. A lot of theologians don't write, surprisingly. Catholic theologians at this point, from what I've read, haven't written a ton about the fulfillment of first fruits in New Testament, meaning, right, like the fulfillment of God's promise to us, right, especially us as Gentiles, quote unquote. What's interesting is that Jesus is the first fruit.
Yeah.
Nice. He's the Son, right? Mm-hmm. He's the only begotten Son of God. He was offered for us, right? So he is the first fruit. But then also, the only other thing that I've seen reference to as of yet in my findings is that his resurrection is considered the first fruit, because he's the first one to conquer death.
Wow.
In humanity.
Yeah.
He will be the only one to conquer death in humanity. Yeah. But it's the first fruits, meaning he finished what Adam and Eve started, right? So it goes back to Genesis, like everything else does. So that's
which is awesome, because I mean, like, for any of our Protestant friends that might be listening, it's like, as Catholics, we do believe in Mary's assumption. And that Mary never died, and was assumed into heaven, but that, like, in doing so, Mary never conquered death.
No,
Jesus is the only one who ever did.
Yep. Or even there would be those that would point to Elijah and Enoch, right, that were taken up. They never actually, quote unquote, died, in Old Testament. Yeah. But that's the thing; they didn't actually die and then rise. Yeah. Right. And then you'll have those that say, oh, well, what about Lazarus? Right. And it's like, well, the only reason why they were raised was because Jesus. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, you can't, like, it's the first effect, or first causality, right? Yeah. Like, in terms of philosophical principles. Yeah. Jesus is the first fruit of everything. Right. So it's cool. I want to reiterate, I'm not saying that there aren't theologians that have gone super in depth in this. I just haven't found any that have specifically focused on this in writings, because to me I like the idea. There is a little hesitancy because everything I'm finding is very Jewish. Yeah. Like first fruits is very Jewish, but to me it's like, well, Catholicism is the fulfillment of what our Jewish brothers are, and so it's like, why not take it and make it our own, because Jesus is the fulfillment of everything Jewish, Yeah. So
no, that's cool. And I mean, like, it's so we've kind of turned it into this, like, call to action, like, amongst ourselves. And, like I said, my heart is specifically, like, towards, like, other men in like a brotherhood kind of a thing. But I like how you say it, like, it's not specifically just men, you know, like, I mean, you tag your wife in it every day. Yeah. And I've started tagging my sister in it, because I talked to her about it and she thought it was a cool idea. And, I don't know if she's doing it too, but she has friends who are men who are, kind of starting to try to convert into a deeper faith. And I'm thinking, well, if she can kind of get them involved too, that this really can grow into a movement of just guys who are just trying to pray. And I love the term, like, Mary's army, Yeah. And it's really, like, I think Fulton Sheen was very right in saying that the laity is going to save the church. But I think specifically, like, for that to happen, men need to rise up. And men need to be men.
I cannot agree more.
Yeah. We've grown up in this like, I don't know about you, but I remember, like, growing up, it was always the women praying in, like, the Mexican culture. And even, like, when I did, like, my first retreat and the kids would go up and share, they all told the same story. Well, my grandma. Yeah. It was never my grandpa. It was never my dad. And so why can't we be now the generation that says no? Like, the men need to stand up and lead. We are the priest of our household. Yeah. The man needs to be the one to lead his family. Yeah. If you're frustrated because, you know, you can't make it to church on time, or you're not going to church, and you're the man, you're the head of your household, like, you need to take that upon yourself to say no. Like, we're going to get to Mass on time. We're going to go to Mass every Sunday. We're going to pray after Mass. I love that. And I don't have the luxury of doing this because I work on Sundays, but I love that you, like, really hold the Sabbath holy, you know, like, you really make it a point to Sundays, our day of rest, to be home as a family and be with each other. And that's awesome.
Thank you. I think it goes, that is not insular to your upbringing. Now, mind you, my dad, came in later into the picture, right?
Yeah.
And owned that, right? But it was like, there was a period of time that I remember very distinctly where my mom was running Cenacles, right? Do you remember Cenacles? Yeah. So my mom was running Cenacles, like, out of our house, right? Or we were going to other people's houses that were Cenacles. And it wasn't that my dad had an aversion. It just, again, it actually is a root of what we're restarting, so to speak. Like, what he struggled with was, like, why do I need her? I've got Jesus, right? Like, it's the classic, like, this weird thing that guys do where it's like, I don't need the woman, like, I got him, right?
Yeah.
And I say that tongue in cheek, but there is there's a deeper rooted sense of, like, I think psychological / spiritual issue there, in terms of, like, we think that they're, like, to be macho, we should be, like, with other men.
Yeah.
But again, in Catholic tradition, it's a both and. Yeah. We can't be true men without the juxtaposition of a solid woman next to us, right? Yeah. Like, as men, and I shouldn't say we can't. I guess that's maybe poor philosophy right there, or logic, but at some sense there's a deep root of, like, there's this aversion similar to what happened with Adam and Eve. There's this aversion of, like, I don't want to be tied to woman. Yeah. Right? And yet we need woman. Yeah. Absolutely need woman. Yeah. And I mean woman with, like, the capital W. Right. Right? And so it's like, it's Mary, it's the wives that we have in our lives, it's the church, you know, the spouse, you know, like, of the spouse-dom, so to speak.
The bride of Christ.
Yes, the bride of Christ. And so that's kind of tangential. Back to your point. The Sabbath holy, really, like, it started to morph into that when my dad started, like, really taking that and saying, we're going to adhere to what the catechism says. Yeah. Right? The catechism is pretty specific about what Sunday should look like. And if you don't know that, I'm not going to divulge that on here. Go look it up. Yeah. You know, and I'm not, you know, I'm talking to everyone when I say that, like, and again, work that, like, as men, we have to juggle and balance in the modern era, right? Like, especially for you, Rick, like, and there's plenty of men that will listen to this, that it's like, I get that not everyone has a Monday through Friday, you know, 6 to 6 job, right? Yeah. But there are ways that we can make sure that we're imposing on our children and transitioning a sense of heritage that is essential to spiritual, psychological, emotional physical well-being, meaning we're establishing these parameters of we will live this way because it is right and it is just and it is good for us, right? So if we can't give the whole of Sunday, how much of Sunday can we give?
Yeah.
Right? You know?
True.
Yeah. It's to exactly what you started out with. It's a function of men being leaders and saying, this is what we're going to do. And you guys aren't going to like it most of the time, right?
Yeah.
But eventually they will, because most of our children and even our wives like Jamie's not resistant. She loves the fact that it's like, hey, let's talk about this. Let's frame out what this is going to look like, and then once it gets rolling, we all love pattern. We all love rhythm in our life, right? Like we love cycle. That's the human condition, and nature is knowing what's coming, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's like once our kids know that, hey, Sundays, we don't do these things. But in order to not do chores on Sunday, it means we need to do those on the other 6 days that exist.
Yep.
Right? Like, so if we know that this day is coming, in order for it to stay holy, then we need to make sure that these days are what we do those things in, you know? Yeah. So.
Yeah, no.
That was a long response, I think, to what you...
No, but I mean, you know, it's just what we're called to as men, you know, and I think that, like I mentioned, like I think the generation before us maybe didn't do it the right way, or, you know, it just wasn't, I mean, but it's like, why not us? Why not now? You know, it's like, we need to be men. Every generation should be better than the last, you know?
Agreed.
And if our fathers, not to say that, I mean, I feel like yours was. Your dad is a great man, but I know that my father wasn't always the best example of it, you know?
Well, and I think my dad would even say the same thing. Like, in terms of he wasn't always the best. And still probably would say I'm still not the best example. But the reality is that's... And I think it actually goes back to the Screwtape letters. It's like what's done in the past is a fixed thing.
Yeah.
That's not something we can really actually change. We can change here, and what changes here in the present does affect the future.
It absolutely does.
Right.
And I think that for a lot of us, like, we grew up with, like, our moms were the anchor, or our grandmas were the anchor.
Yeah.
You know, and now it's time for men to stand up and lead and take the charge and teach our kids how to pray, you know. And I won't go into too much detail about, like, what's going on with my mom, but she's been in the hospital, and it's been some kind of rough days, and some days where she isn't even conscious, you know. And I've been there by her bedside praying a rosary with her, and just saying, Mom, like, just like you taught me how to pray, now here I am, and I'm going to pray it with you. And I know that you can't really talk right now, and you don't have the capacity to, but I know that you hear me, and I know that you understand, so I'm going to pray, and you just follow along, just like you taught me how to pray. Because there were so many times growing up that my mom was like, all right, grab your rosaries, and we're, like, oh, man, but there we were, you know. And so now that's our call as men, to stand up and lead our families and teach our kids how to pray and show them that example, and, you know, for a new generation in the church to rise up. Yeah. Like, we are the answer to what's going to fix the church. Agreed.
And it's not major things. That's the thing. That's what, you know, it's the seemingly mundane and small and ordinary things that we do consistently over time. I think that's also another, like, for me, like, that resonates with first fruits, is it's not to our comment about mountaintops and, you know, doing these big things, or setting up these big concerts in our minds of how things are going to go. It's like, no. That's not, like, we're, like, the saintly life, the holy life, is one of small decisions that translate big over many, many years. Yeah. Not big decisions that happen only every once in a while that don't change very much. Yeah. Right? It's these small decisions that consistently over time, done well or imperfectly, but consistently perfected, not by us, but by grace. Yeah. Right? That then translate to large, like, to your point, like, my hope and prayer is that every one of our kids, and I know you feel the same way, every one of our kids goes into holy marriages, holy vocations, and guess what? That's the salt of the earth. Yeah. That's what changes many generations, right? Not just this generation, but like 4 generations down, because the effect that they have on the communities that they go into and that they serve and that they are in, right? Like in an ordinary but extraordinary way, become what the church is, which is beautiful and amazing. And it may be small, it may seem insignificant, but guess what? How many saints are in heaven that aren't canonized? Right?
We mentioned the ripple that turns into a wave. Or, the what saint? I remember what saint it was. We're not all called to do great things. We're all called to do small things with great love.
That's Therese of Lisieux.
Yeah.
I think. I'm pretty sure.
Little flower.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, cool, dude. What do you want to close out with?
I don't know.
Where can people find you?
Oh, man.
On the socials or email or whatever other ways that you can communicate with.
Yeah, well, I don't add a ton of people on Facebook just because I've gotten deleted by I feel like more people than I've added, which doesn't make sense. But which is fine. But you can follow me on Instagram, Rick Valdez Music, at Rick Valdez Music. And that's, I mean, I don't know. I don't love the whole social media thing. I'm not going to say I'm not active in it, but
I just like to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like the movement, right? If people are wanting to get engaged, then
I feel like Instagram is really kind of where you and I are focusing a lot of our attention right now. And Instagram can be such a vain place and a very impure place. There's so much there that
agreed.
I mean, like Candace Owens talks a lot about like Instagram being softcore porn, like it really is. You know, it's not hard to go on there and
find bad stuff.
She constantly talks about every time she logs into Instagram, it's just butt cheeks everywhere.
Well, what's funny is if I go to search for stuff, all of a sudden I'm just like, oh gosh, like I have to literally just cancel, forget it. Like it's not even worth it.
But so I just kind of feel like we're trying to take that engine and turn it into something good.
And that's like for me, it's like rather than seeing it as something that we move away from and forget that's bad. It's like, let's be the salt in that. Yeah. Right. Let's be the presence in that hopefully converts whoever it's going to convert.
Yeah. And so trying to use it for that, like the First Fruits thing has been very active. That's also where I post a lot of like my music stuff. I've posted a lot of, I've been a little weary of posting like original stuff on there just because none of it's copyrighted yet.
No.
And so
and they can, I know, at least I think with the whole Meta family, they can actually claim copyrights if you post it.
Interesting.
If there isn't copyright.
Makes sense.
Prior.
So, but I post covers on there.
Sure.
I love, doing country covers. And so I've had a lot of those posted on there. I think I did post like one original on there. But yeah, that's really the only place. If anyone wants to get a hold of me for any reason at all, same email, rickvaldezmusic@yahoo.com. Is, if you want to shoot me an email for any reason, you can reach me there. And then for those of you locally here in town, very involved we're at OLPH every Sunday at the 9:30 Mass. Eli and I sing at that Mass, but I also do a lot of music with Holy Cross Ministries. We have the Marian Conference here coming up at the end of October. I'm not sure if this episode will be released in time for that, but you can go to holycrossministries.net, and really any event like a retreat or anything that is done through them, my brother and I do the music for, so we're involved in that as well. So those are some of the places where you can reach us.
Awesome. And then podcasts will be posted to everything: Spotify, iTunes, you name it, whatever, source that you go to for your podcasting, will be there. And then circaignem.com right now is just the first fruits. I'm kind of fleshing that out, all that apparel stuff, but I will flesh out like podcast stuff on there as well, so you guys can check us out there. Cool.
And Circa Ignem Instagram.
Yep. Yeah.
So
cool. Thanks, man.
All right, man.
Appreciate it. Yep.